Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Tuesday. One day closer to the season. We're one day closer to college football being back on our TVs, man. Saturday, week 0, we get TCU North
Yep.
Carolina over in Ireland. We got some good games, and
Yeah,
let's be real. They could be any games, and they will be on our TVs because we all
that's
need
right.
college football back.
There's
We
no
need
doubt.
it
Heck,
back.
I may have football all weekend. I'm going to the Mishawaka Penn game on Friday night with Vince,
Nice.
and then and then we're going to be hitting up the obviously all the college football games on Saturday. So I am super excited about it. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I love it. Our girl Karen in the chat reminding us 12 days until Notre Dame kicks off their
Yes,
2026
sir.
campaign. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yep.
This time next week we'll be previewing the opponent and diving into the nuts and bolts of the Notre Dame Wisconsin matchup. But before we get to all of that, we're kind of bringing the conference preview series to an end. We previewed the ACC and the Big 12 yesterday. Today we are diving into the Big 10 and the SEC, wrapping all of that up with a mailbag. Then we're kicking off the show today by talking about, kind of what are the implications for Notre Dame when you look at these two matchups. It's breaking down. Obviously, they don't play the SEC in the regular season this year. Have the last couple of years. They play a couple of Big Ten teams this year, 3 to be exact, between Wisconsin, Purdue, and Michigan State. It's an interesting conversation to have. And then we're going to preview Big Ten, give some superlatives, give our thoughts on the conference championship game, and then we're going to do the same thing for the SEC. It's going to be a really fun day today, man.
I am very much looking forward to it. Challenging to put some of these things together as always. We break down and rank. We predict every single game and that these teams play, and then put them out there. So I'm very much looking forward to today's predictions. But we have some things we need to talk about first, Trev. There's you talk about the Big Ten and the SEC. Well, I think one thing that we've talked about this summer is which league is better. And I think what our breakdown today is going to show, Trev, is that the Big Ten to me still has the best teams on the top. The 3 best Big Ten teams to me are better than the 3 best SEC teams, just on the whole. Maybe Texas beats Ohio State in Austin, but I think at the end of the year, Ohio State still be the better team.
Sure.
So there's some interesting aspects there, but it also reminded me that the SEC is also this year going to be a much deeper conference. But the Big Ten, for all the talk about how good it is and how deep it is, it's a 3-team league. And I think our rankings today are going to kind of show that, where the SEC is, maybe they don't have the star power at the very, very top, although that could change. We'll have some fun talking about that today. But the depth of the SEC this year is significantly better, in my opinion. Last couple of years, the depth of the SEC has been overrated. This year, I think the depth is going to be a little bit more legit. I just don't know if they have a team that's capable of winning a championship. That's what has to be answered during the season, because they haven't even had a team win a semifinal game the last couple of years, and like they had 5 teams. They stacked the deck as much as they could have stacked the deck last year to try to get multiple SEC teams into the semifinals, and they could still only get one. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean their conference champ is over in the playoffs right now. I mean, it's completely different outlook.
And the game that they played against their own league was a lot more competitive than the game the year before where they played an independent team. So that's for darn sure.
Yep. Brian, before we dive into the outlook of each conference, we give our predictions and our rankings and where teams fall. We're going to look at this from a Notre Dame lens, and we're going to talk about what some of these implications are for Notre Dame. Yesterday we talked about the ACC and how this is a major opportunity to stake their dominance. You're facing 2 of the top teams in the ACC. Yesterday we both had Miami at number 1. You had SMU at number 2. I had SMU at number 3. So they're playing 2 of the 3 top programs in the ACC. They're playing one of the top 2 teams in the Big 12. The outlook for the Big Ten is a little different, though, which is an interesting place when you look at Notre Dame's 26 schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that there's 3 big teams, the Big Ten teams on it. I enjoy beating the Big Ten. I like watching Notre Dame beat Big Ten teams, and Notre Dame beat a couple Big Ten teams last year by double digits. They played a Big Ten team in the 3 Big Ten teams in the playoffs in 2024. Beat 2 of them, lost to 1 of them. So, it's good. I've always said I have no desire to join the Big Ten permanently for a million reasons. Not even considering like the past history of the Big Ten keeping Notre Dame out. more than anything, just the regional aspect where you're going to have like 9 games against, well, now 7 games against teams that are just in your region, which is kind of interesting. I like that for most of college football. I don't like that for Notre Dame, because they're an independent.
Sure.
And that's just not the brand that they are. But at the same time, it's like, how much am I going to really enjoy beating up on the Big Ten this year? Because you're getting 3 teams that we rank relatively low, Trev. If I'm going to go back and look at this, I think we both have, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3. We have 3 of the teams that Notre Dame play this year ranked 12th or lower in the rankings on mine. And then you have the highest is 8 in the league. And then the other 2 are, 12, or actually 14 and 18. So, they don't play teams where it's like, oh, wow, you beat the number 1 and number 2 team in the league. What a great year you had. That's not going to be the case for Notre Dame against the Big Ten this year. And then they don't play an SEC team. But that doesn't mean that there's still not a lot of value in Notre Dame against the Big Ten and the SEC. And we'll discuss that in this next segment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when you dive into it, but here's why this is so important. Been a lot of talk about Notre Dame and the join the conference thing, like you mentioned. But I think one of the reasons why their level of dominance over some of the lower tiered teams in the Big Ten, Wisconsin, Michigan State, they've both been down. Purdue's just been flat out bad. 0-18 in conference the last 2 years. They have a combined, 3 wins over the last 2 years. Obviously had the coaching change from Ryan Walters to Barry Odom, but their outlook is not much better this season, but we'll dive more into that in the second segment of today's show. But why this is so important is it's going to be very difficult for me and some other Notre Dame fans to talk about, I think Notre Dame would fare well in the Big Ten if they're not beating the lower tiered teams in the Big Ten to the same degree that the higher tiered teams are. That was a knock last year on Notre Dame. It's other teams are facing Purdue and they're blowing them out. And I know the final score of the Notre Dame Purdue game was 56-30, but between, Ohio State and Indiana and the teams that Purdue's faced in the past are not allowing 23, 24 first half points against Purdue. And that's something that's going to have to get corrected this year moving forward for Notre Dame is if you are going to play some of these lower tiered teams, you have to beat them to the degree that the top level teams in their conferences are.
That's absolutely true. And when you obviously look at Indiana last year, they beat Purdue by 53. Notre Dame beat them by 26. Now, Ohio State only beat them by 24. And Michigan beat them by 5. Illinois beat them by 16. So Notre Dame still gave Purdue their 3rd most convincing loss of the season, if my math is mathing here. I think Washington beat them by 36. Indiana beat them by 53. But to your point, that was not an Ohio State team that was out there just crushing people every game like they were the year before. And I think that's going to be a different type of Ohio team this year, in my opinion. I think they're going to be a more dominant team this year, which will offensively, which we'll get into. So when you look at it, and then also, Trev, when you look at the schedule and you compare Notre Dame, it's like the thing that's a little disappointing about this year's Big Ten schedule is they don't exactly play a bunch of Big Ten teams that you can say, oh, look how Oregon and Ohio State did against these 3 teams. There's only 1 team on the schedule that also plays Oregon, and I don't think any of them play Ohio State, which is obviously a little bit disappointing. But there's only 1 that plays Indiana, but that's 1 metric that's out there. And to your point, it's kind of like when Notre Dame played Arkansas last year. That's what it's got to be like. When you look at how does Notre Dame need to handle the Big Ten this year, that's going to be it. Like, yeah, we played 3 Big Ten teams, and we gave each of them the worst beatdown that they had all season. Notre Dame gave Arkansas by far its worst beatdown all year. No, Arkansas wasn't good, but they were competitive in like 6 of their 8 conference games, and it wasn't until like game 7 or 8 where the league as a whole outscored Arkansas by more than what Notre Dame did when they beat them by 43. And so when you talk about the statement that Notre Dame gets a chance to make against the Big Ten this year, the first aspect of it is handling your business in the regular season. I think the other part of it too is when you look at when Notre Dame plays these Big Ten teams, games 1, 3, and 4. I mean, that you're starting your season against the Big Ten basically with a little break in there to play Rice. What statement do you make to yourselves against the Big Ten? But then also, what statement can you help make about the Big Ten as a conference? Because the Big Ten's going to have a lot of opportunities this year to play teams out of their conference, including, even though there's only a couple teams that actually do this, Ohio State and Michigan, including a couple of their top teams that have really tough games out of conference. Penn State doesn't play anybody. Oregon plays Boise and Oklahoma State, which is, I respect that, because when that game got scheduled, Oklahoma State was a better football team. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a home and home. But in the reality of what the season is, they're not tough games. USC plays nobody out of conference. Indiana plays nobody out of conference. But there are a lot of games between the Big Ten and other leagues, and Notre Dame has a chance to be part of a statement that says you are top heavy as a league. You are a 3 at the top, and everybody else is depending on how this goes. And so I think that's an opportunity that Notre Dame could do. Like, yeah, these 3 teams maybe weren't good in your league, but look at how we beat them compared to how everybody else beat them. And that shows you that who Notre Dame is. So I think that's a part of this conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it almost deflates the argument of some of the middle tier Big Ten teams when they do go play a Purdue, if they play a Michigan State, if they go play a Wisconsin, and it's almost like a gauging tool of, okay, how did Notre Dame do versus how did Minnesota do against Wisconsin, or how did Ohio State do against Wisconsin? So I think that's going to be a really interesting piece. And when I think about Notre Dame versus the Big Ten this year, there's going to be no win that they pick up. Even they can dress it up as much as they want to. Even the Week 1 game, something that we're all excited for. They're 20.5-point favorites on FanDuel, and we're just excited to see the boys run around in the blue and gold again. But there's no way that you can dress that game up to make it for what it is, and it's Notre Dame most likely beating a lower-tiered Big Ten team. So I'm with you completely. It's not going to be something where people walk away, it's like, yo, did you just see what Notre Dame did to the Big Ten? But that's a piece of it, too.
One aspect of it, Trev, before we kind of get into the potential playoff matchups against the Big Ten and how important that is, one aspect of it, though, is what I do like, however, is if Notre Dame starts the season playing like really good football, they're locked in, the revenge tour is loaded, right? It's the lead article, the title of the lead article in our football magazine, our football preview. Which, by the way, if you're not a member and you haven't read that, or you are a member and haven't read that, you've got to check that out. So, boards.irishbreakdown.com. The 104-page Notre Dame football season preview magazine is awesome stuff. But the point being is, you start the season off and you're just annihilating teams. And then what's the narrative going to be? Well, they haven't played anybody. And then what can Notre Dame say? Yeah, well, it's not our fault the Big Ten sucks. After the first couple good teams. But I do like the idea of, if Notre Dame starts the season on fire, they're doing it against Big Ten teams. And then you can look back and be like, dude, we had tougher games against ACC teams than we did Big Ten teams. That's kind of an aspect of it as well. But you're going to have to go out there and handle your business. And, because like I said, there aren't a lot of matchups where, and the negative is not so much that, you don't have anyone to compare them to, but it's like, you get one crack at having a more impressive win against them. Now, you look at Wisconsin, for example. They play. This is why I laugh when people talk about, like, you got to join the Big Ten to play tough schedules. Really? Okay. This is who Wisconsin plays this year: Penn State, Michigan State, UCLA, USC, Iowa, Rutgers, Maryland, Purdue, Minnesota. No Ohio State, no Oregon, no Indiana, no Michigan. Like, okay, yeah, that's. Boy, I'm sure glad Notre Dame joined the Big Ten to get that home slate this year. Couldn't have done that with an ACC schedule. But you look at it, if USC is as good as people think they're going to be this year, there is a potential of that head-to-head, maybe. But then you get into Michigan State and Purdue. Purdue this year obviously plays Indiana. They play Penn State and Iowa also. Wisconsin also plays Penn State and Iowa. So you are going to have a road game against Purdue, and then Purdue ends the season with a road game at Indiana. So if we are coming down to where, they're splitting hairs between Notre Dame and Indiana for seeding, you can at least have one data point against Indiana that says, hey, you played this team, we played this team, and this is how we beat this team compared to how you beat this team. And then you look at Michigan State. Now you have that with Oregon because you get Michigan State at home. They play Oregon in East Lansing. Oregon hasn't necessarily played like gangbusters when they've traveled across country late year. They've had some kind of sloppy wins. If Notre Dame can handle business against Michigan State early in the year and then watch Michigan State go give Michigan everything that they can handle, and then they go give Washington, Oregon, and I mean, to a degree, Washington, but we don't think Washington is going to be a playoff contender. More so Oregon, then maybe that's something you can look at and say, hey, that's one data point amongst several other data points that you can use to say, hey, this is how Notre Dame stacks up against those teams.
Yeah, agree completely. And the final, you're talking about the playoffs and the playoff conversation surrounding the Big Ten. Another piece of this too, Brian, is let's be real about something. The national championship kind of goes through the Big Ten right now. The previous 3 national title winners have been from the Big Ten. In Notre Dame's last playoff run, they faced 3 Big Ten teams in the postseason. Indiana in the first round, Penn State in the semis, and then obviously Ohio State in the national title game. Notre Dame's also going to have success against the Big Ten teams in the postseason as well. Because if I were a betting man, the 2 conferences that we're going to talk about today, odds are Notre Dame is going to be matched up against at least two premier teams from those conferences. And that's going to be a big piece of their long-term success as well. It's not just going to be solely dictated by what they do in the regular season.
I sure hope so. Look, to a point that you've made 100 times this offseason, I don't care who Notre Dame beats on the way to championship. I'm going to be excited about a championship. Yeah. But looking at it from a more of an analysis standpoint, could you imagine if Notre Dame wins a title and doesn't have to play a Big Ten or an SEC team? The narrative that will exist if that happens. And there will be no pushing back like, well, yeah, I mean, we beat the team that beat your team. It doesn't matter. We had a bad, I really hope they play at least 2 of those teams from those leagues, even if it's 2 Big Ten teams or 2 SEC teams. But if you can get at least 1 and 1, and I wouldn't be opposed to 3. Like if Notre Dame plays 3-4 playoff games, I'd love to get nothing but Big Ten and SEC teams in the playoffs. You want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And look, we can joke about the Big Ten's a top-heavy league, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but those top-heavy teams have won championships 3 years in a row. Here's a simple fact. Whether we like it or not, Trevor, the national championship, until proven otherwise, goes through the Big Ten. You want to win a championship, you've got to go through the Big Ten to get there. So, yeah, Notre Dame can beat up on some bad Big Ten teams early in the year, but when they get to the postseason, they're going to have to find answers. To be able to say, hey, you want to get to here, you got to get through this team, somehow, some way first. And that's going to be a big part of this.
Let's talk about the SEC because this is an interesting conversation because unlike other seasons, Notre Dame doesn't play an SEC team in the regular season this year. If there is going to be a matchup between Notre Dame and the SEC, it's going to come in the postseason, and that's going to be something to track and watch, but there is still something to keep your eye on this year between Notre Dame and the SEC. It's more of a style fight than it is a matchup on the field that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. Notre Dame, whether they have a direct a direct competition against the SEC this year or not, there's competition against the SEC. They played an SEC team last year, lost. They played 2 SEC teams the year before, correct? And one, they played Georgia in the playoff, and then obviously beat Texas A&M in the non-conference. And so they don't have that, hey, we beat this team and this is how it compares to that team or the other team or whatever the case may be. Now, there are some teams on Notre Dame's schedule that have SEC opponents on their slate. I don't know nobody that necessarily has any big games against SEC teams, but there are. For example, Miami plays Florida. So
Ohio State, Texas, stuff like that.
Right. But like Notre Dame doesn't play either one of those teams. Right. So it's there aren't even a lot of instances, Trev, where when we look at opponent schedules, there's like a lot of these games where it's like, okay, we didn't play, looking at it from Notre Dame's standpoint, we didn't play an SEC team, but we played so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. They played an SEC team, and Notre Dame beat that team more convincingly than that team. And unfortunately, that's not even something we're seeing. Like last year, Syracuse played Tennessee, but you look at North Carolina, they play a Big 12 team. They don't play an SEC team. Miami does, right? Miami plays an SEC team. Michigan State doesn't play an SEC team. Purdue doesn't play an SEC team. Stanford doesn't play an SEC team this season. Looking at Boston College, they play a Big 12 team this year. SMU doesn't play an SEC team this year in the regular season. So when you kind of go through the Notre Dame schedule, it's not even like, it's kind of disappointing. It's not even like, hey, they didn't play an SEC team, but there's this game that you compare it to. So it's really hard to draw lines between stacking up Notre Dame against the SEC with any other data other than what? Style points. That's it. So when you look at how Notre Dame plays, if the perception of your schedule is that you don't play a strong schedule and you play a bunch of bad Big Ten teams and bad ACC teams outside the top two, and your schedule's very top heavy, you play 4 good teams and everybody else is bad. And then based on the preseason voting, that's kind of how it shapes up, right? You had 3 top 20 teams in the preseason polls, and then you had Navy that was just on the outside of the top 25. They were around I think 30, 31. So there's 4 teams in your schedule that had a winning record last year. Everybody else. So when you talk about how Notre Dame performs, that's why Notre Dame has to play at a high level. It's not just about winning against a lot of these teams. When you're playing Wisconsin, Rice, Michigan State, Purdue, North Carolina, Stanford, Navy, Boston College, and Syracuse, it's not just about winning. It's about winning big. And I would even argue in games against SMU and BYU, all I care about in those games is winning. That's all that matters in those games is just win the game. Having said that, you and I can say until we're blue in the face that we think SMU or BYU are borderline top 10 teams. I'm not saying we're saying that. I'm saying if we believed that and we were trying to make that case and we had this data point, that data point, and look at BYU's record the last 2 years and look at SMU's record and blah, 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 and we're trying to make this case, nobody's going to buy it because they're from the Big 12 and the ACC. So if Notre Dame beats a top 15 SMU or a top 15 BYU by a touchdown, it's like, yeah, it's a good win, but it's not like, whoa, did you see that? Like if Bama or LSU or Georgia beats a top 15 team on the road or at home by a touchdown. We saw that last year with look at that gritty, hard-fought win over 5-7 Auburn. You know what I mean? So the reality is that Notre Dame's schedule sets up nicely to play good teams down the stretch. But even in those games, winning is all that matters. And if you win, you're in. But when it comes to seeding and positioning, you want to make some points. You got to win, and you got to win convincingly. The Miami game is just win. That's one you'll get credit for if you win by a point or by 40 points. You just got to win. But that's where Notre Dame is, Trev, is they're in a style fight with these teams. And that's really what it boils down to. Having said that, when you get to the postseason, there's probably going to be 4 or 5 SEC teams in the playoff again. There's a good chance you're going to have to go through the SEC again to win because I'll say this, Trev. I really hope if you say, okay, Brian, listen, Notre Dame's going to play 2 teams from either the Big Ten or the SEC in the playoffs, and you pick which one. We're going to play 2 from one and 1 from the other. That's who Notre Dame's going to get. I'd say give me 2 SEC teams. Because I feel like when it comes to Notre Dame versus the SEC, there's still this, to me, weak narrative about, Notre Dame's win over Georgia doesn't mean a whole lot because they didn't have Gunnar Stockton and make whatever excuse you want to make. Now, let's ignore the fact that Georgia fans told us for a month that they were better off without Carson Beck. Let's ignore that for 5 seconds, okay? The reality is that we may know that's a dumb argument, but they actually believe that nonsense. They've convinced themselves. That's what kind of, people with cultish aspects to their fandom are going to do. They're going to spin something and convince themselves of something. So when I look at it, say, I want to play good SEC teams in the postseason because you shut them up. If you go beat the best Big Ten team in the playoff, for the most part, real Big Ten fans, not Indiana fans who've been like football fans for 5 minutes, but like Ohio State fans, if you beat them in the postseason, they're going to be like, for the most part, tip their cap, well done. Both SEC fans are always looking for kind of an excuse. So that's why I say if I could pick between the two, I'd rather play 2 SEC teams because they may be able to 1 away. They're not talking 2 away. But at the end of the day, when you talk about the SEC and the Big Ten together, they have won every championship in college football in the last 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. They've won the last 7 national championships. They've won 8 of the last 9, 10 of the last 12, 11 of the last 13. I mean, that's since 2009. No, let's go back to since '07. When so six, no, it'd be '06. They've won the titles in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. No, excuse me, 12, then 15, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22. That's what the SEC has done. And then in that same stretch, the Big Ten has won 14, 23, 24, 25. So outside of 2 from Clemson and 1 from Florida State, going back to '06, all the titles were won by teams in the Big Ten or the SEC. And if you want to go back even further, who won the title in '05? Texas. What league are they in now? Who won the title in '04? UFC. What league are they in now? SEC won in '03. Ohio State won in '02. You got to go back to 2001 to get a team not named Florida State or Clemson that won a title that's not currently in the Big Ten or the SEC, even though they didn't win those titles when they were there. So again, if Notre Dame wants to climb to the top of the mountain, these are the 2 conferences they got to knock off on their way there. They got close in 2024, but couldn't beat the best of the best. Beat the best SEC team in 24.
Big Ten team, to your point,
right? Exactly.
That's the road will go through either of those 2, and I'm with you in that scenario as well. As long as Notre Dame play, and if I could build like the ideal scenario, it's you beat an SEC team in the quarters, an SEC team in the semis, and a Big Ten team in the national title game. Because to your point, the title's gone through the Big Ten the last 3 years. But I'm with you completely. Even from a narrative standpoint, many believe that the best athletes in the country are still in the SEC. And this year, I think that's more true than it has been in previous years. So I think that's why that would mean so much more. I'm with you there completely. It's going to be imperative that they have success against those conferences in the postseason. Brian, it is now time to preview the Big Ten here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We got done doing the ACC and the Big 12 yesterday, and up on the docket first today is the Big Ten. And it was a very interesting conference to break down. We're going to do the same thing that we did yesterday. We're separating them into blocks, and we actually have 5 different blocks that we're doing today. We're doing 18 to 15, 14 to 11, 10 to 7, 6 to 4, and 3 to 1. Before we dive into it and reveal our rankings, Brian, one thing is for certain. The top teams in the country still belong in the Big Ten. They are home to a lot of the top teams in the country, Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. After that, though, when you get into the conversation around depth in the league, it's looking pretty shallow in the Big Ten.
Well, I'd say it looks shallow based on what we see. That's what's going to make this year interesting, because when you talk to national media and you talk to Big Ten supporters, they're like, oh, USC's back and Penn State's back, and they're going to be a top 20 team. And there's some Big Ten teams getting a lot of hype. So the question is going to be, Trev, who's right? You and I, who view this as a 3-team league essentially, or is it the perception from the national media that, oh no, USC's going to be really strong this year, and Penn State's going to be really strong again this year, and Iowa's going to be Iowa again, and Michigan's back now that they've got, Kyle Whittingham and those type of things. And so I'm very curious to see how this plays out. And one of the things I'm most fascinated by, which we won't get into today because we already covered it a couple weeks ago, is there's a lot of games out of the conference with Big Ten versus SEC, Big Ten versus ACC, Big Ten versus Big 12 teams, especially some very intriguing Big Ten versus ACC teams. And if you look at like my Big Ten predictions, 3 of my top 4 teams play an SEC team in the non-conference. And I believe, let me go look at my top, I believe 4 of my top 5 teams in the Big Ten play an SEC team out of conference this year. So the Big Ten will have a chance to prove us wrong, in my opinion. They will absolutely get that opportunity to prove us wrong this year. But you and I view this as very much a top-heavy league. And I would argue that there's 3 teams ahead of everybody else. And that's why we there's 2 reasons we broke it down the way we did. One is there's 18 teams in the Big Ten. And the other is because we think there's 3 teams on the top, and then 3 teams kind of fighting to get into that playoff mix, and then we break it up into fours before that. So it's very fascinating. It's very fascinating, and you and I have a lot of variation in this one as well, because I do think to a degree, when you have a level of parity, a lot of parity in the middle of your league. So you look at from 4 to, I would argue, 15, 16 maybe. There's not a lot that separates the number 4 team from the number 16 or 17 team in the Big Ten. There's really not. And so I see a lot of interesting games. Boy, this is a close game between the team that's 5th in the Big Ten and the team that's 15th in the Big Ten. Now, some people might view that as strength. And if it's the 5th team is really good and the 15th team is really good, that would be true. But if the 5th team is mediocre and the 15th team is mediocre, that's not strength. So that's what we're going to have to see play out. Is it because of just how deep it is, or is it just because there's a lot of mediocrity from 4 to 5 to 15, 16?
Well, I think one of the things that made this a very difficult ranking to put together and figure out who fits in what slot is when you have 18 teams in a conference, it's hard to gauge the true strength of a schedule in the Big Ten, because you're not going to tell me that Ohio State's schedule looks like Penn State's schedule, that looks like Indiana's schedule, that looks like USC's schedule. So there is so much room for variance here. I'm very interested to dive into this and see what people in the chat think about where they think Big Ten teams are going to fall, because the difficult part about this, and something that we learned yesterday, is you can't just look at it face value of this team versus this team. It's the culmination of their record. It's, okay, well, this is their conference record because they went 5-4 in conference. Whereas this is this team's record, and they're ranked lower because they went 3-6 in conference. But they only played 2 like opponents. How does that happen? When you have 18 teams in the same league.
That's right.
So it makes it for a really interesting conversation. And we can't make rankings based on a hypothetical, but if this team played this team, who wins? It's like, I don't know. Because they don't play each other.
That's a great point. And that's the point we saw. Notre Dame plays 3 Big Ten teams this year. One of them plays Oregon, one of them plays Indiana, one of them plays none of the top 3 teams in the league. So it's just one of those things where when you break it down, Trev, it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see kind of how it is. I'll fix it, Trev. I can fix it on my end. So let's dive into the rankings and we'll kind of see we'll kind of see where this takes us, because you and I, like I said, have some very different rankings. So let's dive into this, and it's going to be fascinating. But real quick, back up Trev's point real fast. I was going to say this and forgot. The team that I have 4th in the league, Trev has in the bottom 4. Now, I know Trev and I don't disagree on something that vehemently, but I think it backs up the point that there's just a lot of mediocrity. But it's not that I think the team I have 4th is great. It's that the team that I have 4th plays a schedule that is incredibly manageable this season, and I think that's really where when you have so many teams in the league. So the team that I have 4th has to play Indiana, Michigan, and Washington. The rest of their schedule is Purdue, Iowa, UCLA, Penn State, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. Their non-conference is Eastern Illinois and Akron. So, and then an SEC team. So that's what it makes it very challenging to, just because we have a team 4th doesn't mean that I think that's the 4th best team in the league. And just because, Trev has a team 9th doesn't mean we think they're the 9th best team in the league. If we're just talking about on paper, we may think they're the 5th best team in the league on paper, but their schedule is so much harder than maybe another team. And I'll say this, Trev, that's why I think when I look at the SEC, that's another reason why I say we'll have a much better idea of the best teams in the SEC, because they force their way into more matchups between those top teams. And I think that's what is going to make this year really good. I will give the Big Ten a little bit of credit. After garbage schedules the last 3 years, there are some really good at the top in-season matchups.
Yeah.
But just not depth of matchups compared to the SEC, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm ready to dive into these rankings, man. Like I said, we're going to break these up into sections. First, we're going to cover teams 18 to 15, then 14 to 11, 10 to 7, 6 to 4, and then 3 to 1. But this is going to be very fun to dive into, Brian. A lot of fun.
Yes, sir. Let's pull up that and let's get to this. And we'll start off, Trevor, with your 18 to 15 teams.
Yeah, right now for me, team number 18, on my list is the Purdue Boilermakers. This is a team that I'm just not high on, have not been high on, and I just don't think the outlook of their season is looking better. It's tough because, you get Barry Odom going into year two. It is what it is. I'll dive more into them in a second. But I have Purdue at 18, Rutgers at 17, Northwestern at 16, and Minnesota at 15.
My 18 to 15 is I also have the Purdue Boilermakers as the number 18 team in the country. I have Nebraska at 17 in a bit of a change, Wisconsin at 16 and 15 Illinois. Trev, we'll just say this real quick. We'll save some of these teams for for later. But the fact that we only have one of the same four teams in the bottom four says a lot about what we were just talking about the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So the biggest surprise for me is, for example, Illinois is what I was talking about earlier. Illinois is not the 15th best team in the Big Ten. But Illinois this season, when you look at their schedule, they've got to play Ohio State on the road. They've got to play Oregon. They've got to play Iowa. They've got to play at Maryland. It's just a sneaky tough schedule this year, and where some other teams don't necessarily have as strong as schedules. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, one of the same four bottom teams. Yeah. And no, I'm not an Andrew. Is that what we're going to do all day, Andrew? You're just going to take like one little snippet, just like, oh, so-and-so's not high on this team or not. But yeah, I mean, I've on record for 2 years saying I'm not an Anthony Calandria believer. And playing well in the Big Ten does not fix that. So
getting into teams 14 to 11. I have Michigan State at 14, Nebraska at 13, UCLA at 12, Illinois at 11.
My 14 to 11 is I have Northwestern at 14. So going back to yours, we're only two apart on Northwestern. I have Rutgers at 13, Michigan State at 12. So we're not very different there. And I have UCLA at 11.
Yeah, this is where we kind of have the most, I guess you could call it, in common, outside of when we get into the top of the league and the top three teams. But these programs got very difficult to evaluate, because UCLA has a new head coach, Michigan State has a new head coach, Illinois just lost their defensive coordinator, Aaron Henry, to Notre Dame, and then you have Nebraska, and the narrative is tale as old as time with them lately. Is this going to be the year that they bounce back? Is this going to be the year that their quarterback pans out? Who knows? But 14 to 11 was very interesting to put together.
Nebraska, Trev, at 17 is one of those ones where I'm kind of going off of kind of what you said yesterday, which is I just kind of have a feeling they fall apart. Like they'll start off with a couple, they'll start off 3-0, maybe 4-0. We'll see. But once it starts going south, it's going to go south in a hurry. And they play Indiana, Oregon. They play Washington. They got to play at Illinois, at Rutgers, Ohio State, and at Iowa. It's not an easy schedule. The Big Ten doesn't like Nebraska. We know that. We've known that for a while. And so they're just not giving them a real tough schedule this year, or they're giving them a real tough schedule this year again. So they have apparently missed the whole everyone cycles in a bad, a down year one year. They skipped over Nebraska when they did that.
I guess so.
So let's get into 10 to 7.
Yep, my number 10 team in the Big Ten, I have the Maryland Terrapins. At 9, I have Penn State. 8, I have Wisconsin. And then at 7, I have the Iowa Hawkeyes.
My 10 to 7, Trev, I have Penn State 10, Maryland 9. So this is where we're even more similar. We have 3 of the 4 teams the same. We have Iowa the same spot. We just have Maryland and Penn State flipped. Look, I hear all the talk about, how good of a coach Matt Campbell is, and I think Matt Campbell's a good, solid football coach. And he was at a great place, and I think he showed he could, consistently win 8+ games at Iowa State. And, look, in 2024 had Iowa State in the Big 12 title game, as a 10-win team. So it's not that he's not a good coach. That's not a very good roster. And I know that the schedule is not strong. People say it's not strong. But I don't think they're that strong. And I think the schedule, while not easy, still has teams on there that I just think are tough games. You look at Northwestern, at Michigan, at Washington, at Maryland. And as we saw last year, this team is much more vulnerable at home than they've been in the past. Yeah. Will that continue this year with a completely revamped roster? I just think there's this notion that Penn State's still a really loaded team, and Matt Campbell's going to coach a roster that's way better than anything he ever had at Iowa State. I don't agree. I think it's a very Iowa State-esque roster. Like, who's the stud future high draft pick in the skill positions that we can point to this year on their offense? I don't see it. Who's the elite front seven guy that we can point to on their team that they always have in the past? I don't see it. So I actually don't think Penn State's as talented as people think, and that's why I think they have no business being a preseason top 25 team. I'll just give you guys a little preview into Friday when Trev and I come with our group, combined IB top 25. I'll give you one teaser. Penn State won't be in it.
No. Spoiler alert, they will not be. I mean, look, I've talked about them quite a bit this offseason. Look, if their name was still Iowa State, I don't think they'd be ranked in the preseason top 25 because they basically have the entire roster and the majority of the coaching staff that came over. Even FanDuel right now has their over-under win total at 9.5. I believe that their schedule makeup this year is going to give a lot of Penn State fans a false sense of hope around how truly and what the outlook of that program truly is, because their schedule is not that impressive. I will say, I don't think in some areas it's as easy as what others make it out to be. Definitely not hard. Definitely not comparable to some of the other Big Ten schedules. But that roster's just not great. We're talking about, quarterback and Rocco Becht that lost games that they shouldn't have last year in the Big 12. I don't know why so many people believe that coming over to the Big Ten, it's now going to be different. So that's where I'm at with Penn State, man. I'm not high on them.
No, I'm not high on them either. Maryland is one of my sleeper teams. I have them at 9. I have Maryland pulling off some big upsets this year, and I have them as a team that could, if Mike Locksley can just get everybody going in the same direction, they've got a lot coming back on both lines. They have one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the league. It's going to come down to, can their pass catchers and then can their guys that cover other teams' pass catchers play up to par? If they can, I could see Maryland jumping up. If they struggle early, I could also see Maryland absolutely collapsing and quitting. But I like this Maryland team. I do, Trev. I do. I've been on it for a while. I think it's going to come down to, they have a 3-game stretch after their opener against Hanford. They play at UConn, then home against Virginia Tech and home against UCLA. I'm going to make this prediction now. If they're 4-0 after that stretch, they'll win at least 7 games this year. At least. And I think that they could win 8 or 9. If they start the season 4-0, I could see them. I could see that team going on the road and beating Nebraska. I could see them beating Rutgers at home, Illinois at home, Wisconsin at home, Penn State at home, and winning at Purdue. I could see it. So they're my sleeper team in the Big Ten. Big time sleeper team in the Big Ten.
Yeah. They have the pieces to be that sneaky upset team. They have a dynamic quarterback, a very underrated defense. I'm with you on Maryland. They're a team to keep an eye out on for sure.
Yep. And I think they were the nation's best offensive line at limiting sacks last year. And they have, I believe, 3 starters coming back. I think it's their center and the left side of their line all come back. Yeah. Let's go to 6-3, Mr. Trowbridge.
Yeah. 6-3. I have the Washington Huskies at number 6. I have the USC Trojans at 5 and the Michigan Wolverines at 4.
My 6-3 is I have Washington 6, Michigan 5, and Minnesota 4. We'll get into Minnesota in a second, Trev, but Washington at 6. We both had Washington at 6. We're only a spot apart on Michigan. Washington's an interesting team because so far in their tenure, they've been very good at home.
Yeah.
And I do expect that to continue this year. Their home slate is Minnesota at home, Iowa at home, Penn State at home, Indiana at home. That Indiana game is actually, I have Washington winning that game.
Same.
That's why I have them here. Then I have them losing at USC and losing at Oregon, and then there's some other little sneaky games in there for them. Part of Washington's deal is I think their schedule sets up relatively favorably. I have them beating Penn State at home. I have them beating Iowa at home. And I have them losing at Oregon. I have them losing at USC, and I think I have them losing at Nebraska. I think I have to go back and look at my schedule, but I believe I had them also losing at Nebraska. But I think Washington's going to be one of those teams that their schedule looks tough because they have to play USC, Indiana, Oregon. But it's top heavy. It's kind of like Notre Dame's. It's a top heavy schedule. It's some really good teams at the top, and then definitely some winnable games after that. Let's talk about Michigan, Trev. We see Michigan very similar, and then we'll talk about two teams that we see quite differently. One somewhat differently, the other definitely differently. Michigan, we've talked a lot about this offseason, should be very good on the offensive line. I know you love their secondary. I'll say this, if there's a team from this group that's going to fall back, I could actually see it being Michigan. I'm still not 100% sold on their front seven, and I'm definitely not sold on their quarterback. And I know Kyle Whittingham's a great coach, but Michigan has a challenging schedule this year, and I could see them falling back a little bit and still being better than they were last year. But they got to answer the front seven questions for me, and they've got to answer, do they have playmakers on offense? That's a big one for me.
Yeah, Michigan was a very tough team to evaluate, and a lot of what went into my projection with them over the course of the season is what we were going to see from Kyle Whittingham as head coach. I think you could argue, I think the talent was better on their 2025 roster, but the coaching was, I don't believe, anywhere near as good. And it's not just Kyle Whittingham. You bring over Jay Hill from BYU. Still like a lot of the pieces that they have. I mean, I think we talked about it. Ranking top 10 defenses. I had Michigan in my top 10. But part of the reason why is I think Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng is going to have a really good season for them. Like their running back room. Jordan Marshall was productive last year after, what was his name? That got hurt. Justice Haynes got hurt, and then they bring in Savion Hitter, the true freshman running back, who I think is going to play a big role. Be talking about him here in a little bit as well. I'm with you on Bryce Underwood. There's a degree that I have to see it. Now, having said this, I go back to what you and I talked about at the start of the show. You and I both believe that there is a sizable gap between our top three teams and then who comes in at fourth. And that's kind of where some of this comes in, because there's different ways to take this. Like, you have Michigan in the top five in an 18-team conference. Yes, I do. But I don't do that with the sense of they're knocking on the door to be close to Indiana. They're just one of the better teams. You know what I mean?
The way that my predictions went, Trev, I don't have a fourth team even sniffing the playoffs.
No.
I don't.
No, sir.
I really don't. Yeah.
No, yeah. I'm with you.
Let's talk about USC, and then we'll finish up with the Gophers. Tell me why you like USC. You have them 5. Now, I assume, again, you have them 5. It's not like you have them knocking on the door to the college football playoffs. But You have the Trojans 5. I have them, I believe, 8th. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I have USC's schedule very similar. This USC team reminds me a lot of what Notre Dame was in 2023. I think they beat the brakes out of the teams that they're supposed to beat the brakes out of and lose to the 3 best teams that they played. And that's basically what Notre Dame was in 2023. I've said it before. I think Jade Maeva is going to be the Heisman Trophy winner in September because they play in September before they get to Oregon, San Jose State, Fresno State, Louisiana, and then at Rutgers. And so there's a lot of easy wins for them here to pick up. Some of it just got sorted out by what their in-conference record is. I have them losing to Oregon at home, losing to Ohio State at home, losing on the road to Indiana. But then some of your other conference games, you're home against Washington, you're on the road against Rutgers, you're on the road against Wisconsin. Now, USC is the team that I have in the top 5 with the most room for variance because some of their away games, historically, they don't do well traveling east. And that was something that I had to kind of weigh the options of because they're going out east to Indiana. They're going out east on the road to Penn State. They're going out east on the road to Rutgers. So that's going to be interesting to see how Lincoln Riley handles that. But some of it was just what their conference record ended up being. 3 losses to the 3 best teams that they play in conference. And I think that they do have the ability and the talent to beat one of the better teams on the road in their schedule. I have them in a win over Penn State on the road because I firmly believe the biggest obstacle they have to, albeit it is a big obstacle, but the biggest obstacle in my eyes that they have to overcome is the travel piece. I like USC's roster more than I like Penn State's roster. And so it's going to be big. I don't know if Iowa State is going to be a team that, or Iowa State, you can understand why I said that. I don't know if a team like Penn State.
Do. I love that you didn't do that on purpose. That's the best part about it. You weren't being petty. You weren't taking a shot. You weren't calling them the Penn State Cyclones. You literally
Well, because I'm looking at the depth chart and it's like Rocco Becht and I'm just like, all right, well, Iowa State, but no, when I look at that, I don't know if Penn State's going to be able to feed into like the weakness of what USC is and when they go and get punched in the mouth. I don't know if Penn State's going to have that strength to them. I think the biggest obstacle for them is the travel. So that's just kind of how it shook out in the rankings. But having said all that, USC is very far from the top three and very far from me from making the playoffs.
Agree. Let's talk about the Golden Gophers, Trev. This is one that we have very different. It's, first of all, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like my entire reasoning is they just have an easy schedule, because their schedule's manageable, but it's not easy. Here's really what it comes down to. This is a team with a very experienced offensive line. Nathan Roy comes back. He was their left tackle. Greg Johnson comes back. He was the starting left guard. Ashton Beers comes back. He was their starting center last year. And then they added their right guard, Tony Nelson, started the last 2 games at right guard, played in 8. Their right tackle, and again, this is just kind of based off projections, is a guy that's coming in who was a backup at Tennessee. That's the one that they have to second guess, or kind of have to figure out something. But you look at their receivers. They got Perry Thompson out of the portal from Auburn, who I think is a solid player. Jalen Smith comes back after having a good redshirt freshman year last year. Javon Tracy comes in, after playing he was at Miami of Ohio, came to Minnesota last year, had a nice season with Drake Lindsey. They got talent at the tight end position, got to develop it, but there's some talent there. But they've got one of the better backfields in the Big Ten that nobody's talking about. And you and I loved their running back room last year with Darius Taylor and A.J. Turner. The problem is they both got hurt. A.J. Turner, I think, he barely played last year. And then Darius Taylor was banged up all year last year and just did not play the way that you and I both know Darius Taylor's capable of playing, because we've seen him play like that in the past. On top of that, you had a very kind of makeshift offensive line last year. It was an inexperienced offensive line. You had to deal with some different issues up front, but this is still a kid that the year before, Trev, ran for 986 yards and 10 touchdowns and looked pretty good at the end of the year, and I think he bounces back with a really strong season. He also finished the season well, Trev. Missed 3 games of injury, missed another game where he had 1 carry and got hurt. But then the last 2 games of the year, he had 19 carries for 100 yards against Wisconsin and went for 116 yards in the bowl game. Also had 57 yards on 10 carries against Oregon. So he looked a lot more like Darius Taylor late in the year. And then, of course, Drake Lindsey, who I'm very high on, comes back. He had a nice freshman season, had typical redshirt freshman up and down performance. At the end of the year, threw for over 2,300 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 picks. I think he's a guy that's going to really take that big jump in year 2, as long as he can keep himself out of trouble off the field. And he threw 6 picks last year. 3 of them came in 1 game. And then here's what I love, Trev. He threw 6 picks in the loss to Iowa. They went 3-2 down the stretch. Lost to Oregon, lost to Northwestern by 3 in a game where he threw 4 touchdowns and no picks, and then beat Wisconsin and New Mexico. But after that 3-0, this is what he did against Iowa. 16 of 28, 109 yards, 3.9 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in a game they lost 41-3. Games like that are going to tell us a lot about a young quarterback. Bounce back, leads him to a 3-2 record down the stretch, throws 8 touchdowns, doesn't throw another interception the rest of the year after that terrible game. That said something to me about that kid. And that it's like, no, he's not a world beater, but he's a good quarterback with a big arm and a chance to be something really solid. And I think the O-line's going to be good. The run game's going to be good. They're just going to need some pass catchers to step up. And here's a little hint. They have one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten also, in Anthony Smith, who's an absolute dude that nobody talks about. This is a really veteran football team, and I think being an older veteran football team means a lot in college football, Trev. And this is a team that won 8 games last year. They're not that far away from being a team that, to me, that can turn things around. I really don't. I think they've got a shot. They won 8 games last year and lost to Northwestern on the road by 3. I think they're a team that has a shot to turn things around this year. And their schedule helps. I do. I think their schedule helps them. They play Michigan at home. They play Indiana on the road. That'll be tough. But after that, their schedule is, you've got at Washington, which is tough. Michigan at home, at Purdue, Iowa at home, at Indiana, home against UCLA, at Penn State, home against Minnesota or Northwestern, home at Wisconsin. Like those are all winnable games for a veteran football team in places that they have had success to some degree in recent seasons. So that's why I like Minnesota a lot more than a lot of other people.
No, I think that's fair. I think they have a very talented roster. They're some of the most underrated players in the Big Ten that come out of the Golden Gophers units. And but look, the thing that held me up about Minnesota, and you very well could be right, wouldn't shock me if you were. The thing that held me up is a guy driving the bus, or I guess in the Minnesota metaphor, it's rowing the boat. You know what I mean? This is what got me held up on it. All of their, thanks. All of their losses last year came on the road. Mm-hmm. And it's their road schedule that got me hung up this year. I have all the confidence in the world that Drake Lindsey's going to have a better season this year. Definitely think that their defensive end is one of the most underrated defensive players in the league. But when you have road games against Washington, which we know is a tough place to play, road game against Indiana, road game at Penn State, road game at Wisconsin, I'm not high on those teams. But last year they lost to Cal on the road, obviously not in conference, but talking about the road slate, they lost to Ohio State on the road last year. They lost to Iowa on the road last year. They lost to Oregon on the road last year. They lost to Northwestern on the road last year.
And the 3 games against Ohio State, Iowa, and Oregon weren't competitive.
Yeah.
That's the only road loss, just like for full, the only road loss that was competitive was the Northwestern one. They should have won that game. The other 3 were by 13 points or more.
Yep. And that's the thing that got me really hung up on Minnesota. They were a very tough team for me to evaluate because I go through and I look at the roster. I'm like, this is a team that should be able to rattle off, 9 wins against this schedule. But I just didn't have the faith to project that PJ Fleck would be able to consistently get them ready on the road. That was my one big hang up with them.
That's fair.
But it was tough because I do like their roster. That I agree wholeheartedly with.
I had to do that and hold my nose a little bit because you know how I feel about PJ Fleck.
We were texted before the show, and I was like, looks like you're rowing the boat this year. And you're like, yeah, their schedule is what it is, and I like the talent on the roster, but yes, unfortunately, that is what I'm doing. And it was funny.
Not a fan. Not a fan. Everybody knows that. So, all right, let's get into our top 3, Trev. This is the one area where you and I are going to be in blissful agreement. So let's get into our top 3.
And I believe that everybody should kind of be in blissful agreement here with this one. But top 3, number 3 for me, I have the Indiana Hoosiers. Number 2, I have the Oregon Ducks. And number 1, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Which is the exact same 3 that I have. In order. Let's talk about it. Why do we have the defending champs 3rd, Trev?
For me, it came down to the amount of questions that need answered. And that's where you can kind of come up with the debate of like, okay, well, Ohio State also has a good amount of questions. Neither of these top 3 teams have concerns. I have questions about them. It's very similar to what we talked about with Notre Dame when we were talking about the biggest questions they have on offense and defense. They're not concerns. They're just relative unknowns. And my separation for Indiana and Ohio State was I've seen Ohio State have to do it more often than Indiana has. What Kurt Cignetti has done the last 2 years at Bloomington is unprecedented, and it is extremely impressive. But now one of my bigger concerns is, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you lose that core nucleus of those culture builders, and now your portal class looks like everybody else's portal class. It's not guys that you recruited at high school and brought them to James Madison, and then they were portal players to Indiana. They were not portal players to Kurt Cignetti, but they were to the fans in Bloomington and the school. Now it's you have a DN from Notre Dame, you have a cornerback from Penn State, you have a pair of defensive ends from Kansas State, you have a wide receiver from Michigan State, and how are you going to manage that? Now, I still think they're going to be pretty darn good, thus why we both have them 3rd. But that's kind of what I was looking at here. And when you're as top heavy of a league as what the Big Ten is, if you're anywhere in the top 3, I firmly believe you're a darn good football team. But in comparison to Oregon, who returns quite a bit of production from last year, and Ohio State, who has that proven track record of like, yes, we lost this defensive end, and then we replaced him with this defensive end. And then, yes, we lost this corner, and then we replaced him with this corner. We lost this wide receiver, and we replaced him with this wide receiver. Track record in Columbus was a little bit longer. That's what separated it for me. So that's where I'm at with this one. But it was close.
Yeah,
it was very close.
Came down to me is Indiana's the one team that gets upset. I have Indiana getting beat by Michigan. That's the one difference that I have. I have Ohio State. Let me look at Ohio State's schedule real quick. believe I have Ohio State losing to Indiana. I think these three teams all give each other a loss. I think that I have. So let me just pull this up here real quick. All right, so I have Oregon this year. So with their schedule, Trev, I have them losing at Ohio State. I have Indiana beating Ohio State, but then I also have Indiana losing to Michigan and Washington. So we're going after they beat Ohio State on the 16th. Everybody's going to be thinking like, "Oh wow, like this is wonderful." This will be the 17th. This is wonderful. The Indiana's got a clear path to winning the Big Ten again. They've got 2 road games down the stretch that I think they get beat. I think they lose the next week to Michigan, and I think they get upset on in November when they play Washington, when they travel out to Washington. So that's where I have the Hoosiers, because they just haven't really had to make that kind of trip, in my opinion, against a really good team the last couple years. They've gone out west. They went out and, last year they played at Oregon and won that game, but I think that's more, to me, Oregon's just not a good big game team, as we've seen the last couple years. But I just, we'll see. I like this Indiana team a lot, but I just feel like they're going to drop a couple this year that they're not supposed to drop. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, we see that the same. When I broke down their schedule, I have Indiana going 10-2, losing to Ohio State at home and Washington on the road. I have Oregon losing in conference to Ohio State, and then I have Ohio State going undefeated in conference, losing to Texas early.
I have Oregon also getting upset by USC.
Ooh.
Yeah. I have Ohio State as the only one-loss team in the league. I think Ohio State loses to Indiana, and I have them beating everybody else. Yep. I got the Buckeyes in that matchup. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But look, I like this Indiana team a lot. I just don't think it's quite as good as it was last year. I think this team is going to be more similar to what they were 2 years ago, which is a really good football team. Trev, they were a really good football team. They deserved to be in the playoffs 2 years ago. I think their offensive line is still going to be really good. They got really good backs. They've got good receivers. I don't think it's as good of a receiving core they've had the last couple of years. And I have, like, when I look at the defense, I think the defense is going to be very good. Will it be as good as it has been the last couple of years? I don't think that it will be. I think it'll look more like the 24 defense than the 25 defense. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was the beginning of my bold prediction when we were doing the defensive top 10s. I didn't have Indiana's defense in my top 10. Not saying that you saying that Indiana's defense takes somewhat of a step back puts them out of your top 10. But I watched Mike Shanahan lead an offense that averaged 40 points a game with Curtis Rourke. I have more faith that he's going to get more out of Charlie Becker and Nick Marsh and, kind of correct some of the Josh Hoover turnover things and be able to have success with a great running back room.
They're not going to suck.
No,
they're going to be great. It's just, I think their margin for error is a little bit thinner. And let's not forget that this is a team that, against some of the better defenses last year, didn't play lights out. I mean, they didn't play great against Iowa. Their offense did not play great against Oregon in the regular season. They did not play great at Penn State. Their offense did not do a whole lot against Ohio State either. Like, yeah, they put up a lot of points, but even with all the guys they had last year, their offense still struggled against most of the good teams they played outside of Oregon in the semifinals. Lighten up Bama. They should have lit up Bama. Bama had no business being in the playoffs. Yeah. So that was kind of part of my thing too, Trev, is you had that quarterback, to your point. Like, I love Mike Shanahan, but he had that quarterback that could bail him out at the end of games.
Yeah.
I think I like Josh Hoover a lot. I just don't see him being that guy that makes that last play against Penn State, that last throw against, Illinois or Iowa, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we talked about their schedule. This is also the most difficult regular season schedule that they've had since Kurt Cignetti took over. Their schedule, their regular season schedule in 24 was not difficult. They played one good team, and the game was not close. 25, their schedule was better than what it was in 24, but not by much. This year you're getting Michigan, but it's on the road. You're getting Nebraska like you did in 24, but this year it's on the road. You get USC this year. You get on the road against Washington. So it's just a different outlook for their schedule. I'm with you completely.
Well, it's conference championship prediction time there, Trevor Trowbridge. Let's talk about it.
I have Oregon and Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, part of this prediction plays into how I viewed the regular season playing out. I have Ohio State beating Oregon in the horseshoe in the regular season. I have Oregon beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship on a neutral field.
You have Indiana winning in the regular season and Ohio State winning in the title game. Is that what you said? I missed what you said.
No, I have Ohio State beating Oregon in the regular season, but in their rematch in the Big Ten championship game on a neutral site, I got Oregon.
I think you were kind of not coming in, and that's why I was confused. You were breaking up a little bit on me, so I didn't quite hear you said. I was like, why are you talking about Indiana? That's why I was like so confused.
No, you're good.
I have a rematch, and I have Ohio State winning both. Again, I need to see Oregon win a big game against an actually really good team before I'm ready to. Yeah, they beat Penn State in the Big Ten title game 2 years ago because Dan Lanning beat the only big-time Big Ten coach who's worse in big games than he is. So that's why I have the Buckeyes winning both games. And they're both going to be local. I mean, that's still a cross-country trip for Oregon, having to travel from Eugene, Oregon to Indianapolis. That's going to be a lot easier trip for the Buckeyes. Look, I could be wrong. I got a bunch of buddies that are predicting this is the year that Ohio State takes a step back, and I don't know that I see it. I think they're not going to be as good on defense as they were last year, but I think they're going to be better on offense than they were last year, and I think the improvement on offense is going to be greater than the step back on defense. That's why I think the Buckeyes are going to keep rolling. And if you give me an offense give me a top 5 defense with a top, like if you say, okay, you can have a top 5 defense, top 3 defense with a top 25 offense. Is that fair to describe Ohio State last year?
Yeah.
In today's era, I'd rather have a top 5 offense and a top 15 defense. And I think that's closer to what Ohio State's going to have this year. Now that may make it a little tougher for them to make another run to the title game. They're going to have to be better than top 15 on defense. And I think it's debatable if they're going to be top 5 on offense. I'm higher on. I don't think Julian Saint's a future top 10 NFL draft pick like some people do. I also don't think he's this mediocre bum who's not going to get any better like other people think that he is. You know what I mean? Like, well, everybody produces in that offense. Well, Kyle McCord didn't. Not the way that Julian did last year.
Sure.
And again, I've said I think a lot of the issues last year weren't as much about Julian Saint as they were about Brian Hartline. And I don't know what Arthur Smith is going to be, but I have a hard time believing he's going to be worse than what Brian Hartline was as a play caller last year. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I got the Buckeyes winning the Big Ten.
Love it. And in the drought.
I do.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Don't have them winning a natty, Buckeye fans. Don't get too excited, but I do have them. Being the premier team in the Big Ten. I do.
Well, Brian, let's talk about some of the superlatives in the Big Ten here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We did this yesterday when we were breaking down the ACC and the Big 12, and we went through and we broke down superlatives we were talking top offensive players, top newcomers, things like that. We're going to do the same thing here. And I stuck with kind of the theme that we had yesterday of no repeat players. There's a world where at the end of the actual regular season that there's players that fit the mold of both categories. But just so you all are aware who are listening, we didn't go with repeat guys. Because there's actually, look, man, this is a very talented league at the top, which made some of these conversations a little bit difficult. But where we're going to start is with the top offensive player in the Big Ten, Brian. And I'll get us kicked off here. I went with Dante Moore at Oregon. I know.
Really? Okay. Talk about it.
If Oregon's going to have the season that I believe for them to have and go out and win the Big Ten, I think Dante Moore is going to have to play a big role in that. I do. When I look at their schedule and I look at what Oregon's going to have to go through and face in the regular season, you get on the road at USC, you get on the road at Illinois, that's that travel out east game. You're on the road against Michigan State in that travel out east game, but you still have those old school Pac-12 matchups, like I said, on the road against USC and then home against Washington. I think Dante Moore, I think one of the big knocks on him, whether we agree with it or not, the national narrative around him is he doesn't perform well in big games. And I think he kind
Sure.
of scrunches that narrative this year because I think if they're going to go out and win the Big Ten, he's going to have to.
Yeah, look, I think Dante is going to have a heck of a year. I'm going to talk about him later, but I still think the best player on offense in the Big Ten is Jeremiah Smith. Now, quarterbacks are going to get a lot of the focus and attention, and I don't disagree with the thing you just said. Not a thing. There's no, yeah, what you said is true, comma, but, insert. No, I agree with everything you said. He's still not, to me, I still, to me, think Jeremiah Smith is the best player in that league. Now, you could say, well, his production is a little bit more dependent on other people. That's true, but it still makes him the most dominant player in the league, in my opinion. And I would say that if Ohio State's going to be the team that they're going to be, I think the same thing is also true for Jeremiah Smith. And if Julian Sayin makes the improvement that I think Ohio State needs to be the number one team in the Big Ten, that's going to benefit Jeremiah Smith as well. So I went with Jeremiah Smith. I just assumed we were going to have the good one, but I like that we don't. I purposely did not look at your picks because I wanted to have, kind of some fresh eyes and just kind of have some fun reacting to your picks. So we're off to a great start. Let's talk about the top defensive player in the Big Ten. Again, this is all around, can be any position, just the most outstanding dominant player in the Big Ten. Who you got on defense, Trev?
This one might also shock people. I went with Zach Lutmer, the safety from Iowa. He was giving me big Cooper DeJean vibes. Where like Iowa, when Cooper DeJean was there, it's like, yeah, Iowa's not making the playoffs. They're not going to upset Ohio State. They're not going to do this, but he is the best defensive player in the league. He's the game changer for that defense. When I watched this film and I watched him, a lot of reminder of Cooper DeJean. It was very similar, and so that's what I went with.
We are 0 for 2 on agreement, and I kind of dig that, Trev. I'm going Anthony Smith, the DN from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have him repeating what he did last year. If I'm going to have Minnesota as the fourth best team in the Big Ten, a lot of that's because I think Anthony Smith's going to keep dominating. Last year, Trev, he had 17 and a half tackles for loss. He had 12 sacks in what was just an outstanding season at Minnesota. And, I think he's going to continue that. I think he's a dominant player. He's a big old kid, 6'6", 280, just an absolutely outstanding player. And, and I think he had I think he played well against the better teams in the schedule, even with him not having a whole lot of help. That part right there was part of my holdup is like, do they have enough talent around him? But I actually think the talent around him this year is going to be even better than it was last year. But 17 and a half tackles for loss, 12 and a half sacks, 44 pressures. And he had, according to PFF, he had 21 hits plus sacks in the quarterback last year. That's pretty good.
I like that. That's a good pick.
He's
a dude, man. He's a dude.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with that completely.
I dig it.
Let's talk about breakout player on offense. I think there's a lot of candidates in this league that can be up for a breakout player. Who did you go with for your breakout player?
Malik Washington. I think not only, he was productive last year, but the numbers were good for a freshman. The production was good for a true freshman. I look at Malik Washington this year. Again, I have Maryland as my sneaky team. Part of that belief is based on the fact that I think Malik Washington becomes one of the better quarterbacks in the country this year. Top 10 top caliber quarterback. Last year's a true freshman, 57% completion rate, 2,900 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 picks, only 6.3 yards per attempt. So like good numbers for a true freshman, 303 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, but not necessarily light the world on fire numbers. But if you look at how he ended the season, 459 yards, 3 touchdowns against Michigan State, started the season pretty well. I think he's a kid that is going to take his game to a whole new level this year. I also like some of the weapons that Maryland has around him this season. I'm very, very high on Malik Washington, and I think he's not just a guy that Maryland fans know and like the football nerds like you and I know. He becomes a guy that, everybody knows about Malik Washington. And if Maryland has a bounce back season, he's going to go into 2027 as Maryland's, stud in a year where they're hoping to make a playoff run. If Maryland doesn't have a great season, but he's still as good as I think he can be, which is possible, then he becomes a guy that's commanding big dollars in the portal next year. Big dollars. I don't love that, but just the reality of it. I'm a big, big fan of Malik Washington as a player.
Yeah, I like that. I like that completely. My breakout player on offense is Colton Joseph from Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's due for a turnaround, and I like the skill set that Colton Joseph brings to the table. I don't think he's ever going to be a quarterback in the Big Ten that goes out and throws for 3,100 passing yards, but it's his ability with his legs that I think is going to keep Wisconsin in a lot of games. He's going to have to be able to remain healthy over the course of the season because the outlook at quarterback behind him, because quarterback injuries is something that Wisconsin has had to deal with in the past, is not great. But when I look at Wisconsin's schedule and they have games coming down the pipe of at Penn State, at UCLA, you get a cross-country travel there. You're at Iowa, you're at Maryland. We're gonna have the opportunity to watch in November our two breakout players on offense kind of go head-to-head indirectly because obviously they're not on the field at the same time. I think that's going to be a fun matchup. But I'm going with Colton Joseph from Wisconsin as my breakout player on offense. Who's your breakout player on defense?
We got Devin Sanchez at Ohio State, the sophomore corner at Ohio State. Last year he played a bunch last year, but it was kind of in a rotation. Obviously you had the other corner. You had Davidson McNosen. I think he comes back this year. He becomes their top corner, which are opposite Jermaine Matthews. I think he's going to be an absolute dude this year. I actually wasn't super high on Devin Sanchez coming out as a pure corner. I thought he was a little tight-hipped. I thought he was going to be a guy that moves and becomes an elite safety. I thought he's an elite football player. I just didn't know he could stick at corner at this level the way that he has. He proved me completely wrong as a true freshman. He can absolutely play cornerback. So I think he becomes a national name and becomes one of the top corners in the country this year. Now, everybody knows who he is because he was a 5-star recruit, but he's no longer talked about as a 5-star recruit. He now becomes a 5-star player. That's why I'm very high on Devin Sanchez. Who you got, Trev?
Devin Sanchez. I believe that he is in the wave of that younger up-and-coming group of cornerbacks. We've talked about Devin Sanchez a lot, both of the cornerbacks from Oregon, couple of them. One of them I'll talk about here later in the show, so I don't want to give too much of that away. We've talked about Cortland Guillory at Oklahoma. We've talked about Ellis Robinson at Georgia. I think that they're kind of in that next wave of up-and-coming players in the secondary. Devin Sanchez was my pick as well. I like that.
I dig it.
Yeah.
Let's talk newcomers, Trev. Now, newcomers are... It can either be a true freshman or a transfer from outside the Big Ten. So what's funny is I knew that, but I still had Christian Allegro as my top newcomer at linebacker on defense. So I got to figure out who that's going to be because I'm like, oh, shoot, he came from inside the Big Ten. So let's start off with who is your top newcomer? So true freshman or a transfer from outside the league? Who you got, Trev?
So all of this is kind of encompassing, and which is going to make sense why I don't have Jeremiah Smith as my top offensive player in the Big Ten. I'm going with Chris Henry Jr., the wide receiver that's probably going to be starting opposite of him. Here's the reason why. One, Ohio State as a program just has a track record of whatever new freshman, 5-star, big-time wide receiver comes in, they're just good. Now, I'm not getting into the debate of is he the next Maserati Marv, is he the next Jeremiah Smith. All I know is that he's a tremendous football player, and I think he's going to contribute immediately. There's a world where Brandon Inniss takes that next step because I do think he was grossly misused last year in Brian Hartline's offense. But I think you add Chris Henry Jr. gives you that big playability that I personally just don't believe that Brandon Inniss brings to the table. I think he's going to be a good football player. Chris Henry Jr. is an elevator. In that sense, from a playmaking ability, I don't think that field position takes a massive step back because Carnell Tate is gone. I still think you're going to get dimensions of that with Chris Henry Jr. That's why I didn't have Jeremiah Smith as my top offensive player, because we've seen games that Jeremiah Smith has been completely taken away. I mean, there's not a lot, but Texas did it in 2024, albeit he was a freshman. But Ohio State still found success on offense. That's why I'm like, okay, well, if I take Dante Moore away from Oregon's offense, that's not going to look the same. Whereas there's a world, if this projection comes true and Chris Henry Jr. is my top newcomer in the Big Ten, I don't think that their offense is going to be in shambles if Jeremiah Smith, if teams game plan to double and triple team them all afternoon or all evening. So I have Chris Henry Jr. as my top breakout player.
I dig that. Top newcomer?
Top newcomer, yes, sir. Sorry.
I've got J.J. Buchanan from Michigan. Look, I don't know what he is. Is he a wide receiver? Is he a tight end? I don't know, but I think he's going to be their top pass catcher this year. I like the Chris Henry Jr. pick. Is he going to be quite like those other guys? We'll see. I'm confident that J.J. Buchanan's going to be able to put up some numbers. He put out over 29, I think he had like 29 catches over 400 yards last year at Utah. And I think he's going to be a guy that is a 40-plus catch, 600-plus yard guy this year for for Michigan and will
I
become
like
their
that.
top pass catcher. So I'm going J.J. Buchanan. Who you got on defense, Trev? I know who my pick is going to be now. I went with my runner-up, who actually wasn't from the Big Ten last year. So
There you
who's your
go.
who's your top newcomer on defense? Again, reminder: new freshman or a transfer from outside the Big Ten.
Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it,
Did you do the
yeah,
same
I
thing
made
I
the
did?
same. I went with Coy Parrish, who came from Minnesota.
Yep, I'm with you. I'll
But he's
break
going to
mine down.
Oregon, a team that's not
Yeah,
traditionally
it,
in the
it
Big
doesn't
Ten.
seem
So
like it. It doesn't seem like it. Yours is less egregious than mine. Mine was really bad because you're like, dude, how do you not get that one right? Like, it's Wisconsin to Ohio State. Here's mine. I make fun of all the Cyclones coming over to Penn State. There's one I really like, and that's the safety Marcus Neal, who was a really good, productive player for Iowa State last year, Trev. 11 tackles for loss as a safety. Needless to say, he spends a lot of time in the box. And I think the fact that, you're coming into a system that I think he's a kid that's going to come into the Big 10, Big 18, and have a lot of success. I think he's a really good football player. Like I said last year, 77 tackles, including 40 solos, which is a really good year. 11 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions as a safety. So it's not like he's a one-trick pony that just comes down and does nothing but run stop. I think he's a good football player. And he had a chance to play against the Big Ten last year against Iowa. And in that game, he had 9 tackles and 2 tackles for loss in that game and a sack in that game. So this is a kid that knows what it's like to come and play a Big Ten team and play very well. It's a good Big Ten team. So I'm going Marcus Neal. That's my pick.
I love it. I love it. I got
Marcus
two.
Neal Jr. Excuse me.
Okay.
Give him respect to his name.
Okay. Good deal. I have two, and the reason why I'm going with two is one, because I messed up initially and I couldn't pick between the two and sit down and think about it too long. But also, it's both players are coming off of significant injuries, and it's going to depend on how healthy they are. One of them is John Henry Daly, the defensive end at Michigan.
Yeah.
If Michigan is going to be the fourth best team in the Big Ten, like I've projected them to be, he's going to have to be the impact player that people believe him to be. It's going to be a big piece of their success. So he is one of them. The other one's Terry Moore, the safety that transferred from Duke going over to Ohio State. If their secondary is going to not take as massive of a step back as some people believe them to be, or believe them to potentially have, losing Caleb Downs, then I think Terry Moore is going to have to return to the 2024 Duke version of himself, remain healthy. So those are kind of the two players that I would keep my eye on and watch as top newcomers in the Big Ten. But that'll be very close. I went with Coy Parrish. I was like, dude, this is going to be such a good pick. I could talk about football IQ versus athleticism. I was like, came from Minnesota.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But again, yours is less egregious than mine because it makes sense to not think a kid from Minnesota going to Oregon is from the same conference. Wisconsin, Ohio State was very silly on my part. Very dumb. Very dumb. If I thought John Henry Daly was going to be healthy, I'd probably have him in there. I don't think he'll be as dominant as he was in the Big 12. It's better
Sure.
offensive lines in the Big 10. But not as dominant means what? 11 tackles for loss and 7 sacks? That's still pretty flipping good, especially when you look at, newcomers. So I like that pick. If I knew he was healthy, I'd feel great about it. Let's talk about, Trev, the top quarterback. Now, I had Dante Moore for all the reasons you said earlier. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. He's eligible for this for me. So I went Dante Moore for the reasons you talked about. Year 2 in the starting lineup. I think he's better in some of the bigger games, maybe not great, but most quarterbacks aren't great in every single big game they ever play. They just got to make the winning plays. You just got to win. That's the big key. He edges out. Obviously, I had Malik Washington not eligible. He edges out Julian Sayin for me, and I did think about it for a second, but I just think Dante's better. So I'll support your thoughts on him being the best quarterback in the Big Ten. We're there. You obviously went with him. You obviously went with Dante as your top player. So now with Dante not on the board here for this pick, I'm very curious to see who your quarterback pick is going to be in the top quarterback in the Big Ten.
Damon Williams from Washington. I think that, and Tommy Gunn's actually got me thinking about this of who are the teams that could be like the upset merchants in the Big Ten this year. And I believe that to be Washington. They're a very interesting team. But I view very similar about Damon Williams, what he means to this Washington team, the same way that I view Jimmy Clausen on the 09 team, the same way that I view Trinidad Chambliss on this Ole Miss team, is because I think without those guys on your team, I just don't think they're going to be as good. And I think that Damon Williams is going to have ample opportunity this year to prove to people that he is one of the best quarterback in the league that year for his impact on the team. I don't know if he's going to have better rushing numbers than Malik Washington. I don't know if he's going to have better completion percentage numbers than Julian Sain. But when I think of matchups on the road against USC, home against Iowa, on the road against Nebraska, home against Penn State, home against Indiana, and then on the road against Oregon, I think Damon Williams has the opportunity to put up monster numbers in big games. And so that's why I went with Damon Williams.
I dig it. There's a lot to choose from. I mean, just look at the chat. Obviously, Julian Sain's a guy that would have been my number 2. Love the Damon Williams pick. I had him. I think we both had him as a top 10 national quarterback. Some people love Jade Maeva. I don't. I think you don't. I think he puts up a lot of hollow yards. It's a product of a system. I don't think he's a money player. But if he figures out some of the issues that he's had now for 2 years at USC and also had at UNLV, where he turns the ball over too much and doesn't handle pressure very well and doesn't necessarily make very many winning plays, then he could be in there because he's certainly going to put up numbers. There's a lot of good options. Malik Williams or Malik Washington would have been eligible for you because you had a different breakout player. So the one of the reasons that the Big Ten has a chance to me to maybe be better as a league than we think it's going to be is because I do think there's at least a chance that quarterback play in this league is very strong this year beyond the top schools. Even, Drake Lindsey, what kind of jump does he make in year 2 in the system? So that'd be very fascinating to see how that all plays out, Trev. Let's get to top offensive linemen in the Big Ten. Of course we're starting on offense because it's offensive linemen, but Trev, who is your pick for the top offensive lineman in the Big Ten?
Carter Smith at Indiana. He's a big reason why I have a lot of faith that this Hoosiers offense isn't going to take too big of a step back despite losing Fernando Mendoza and a host of receivers and both your running backs. I think he's one of the better offensive linemen. I think he's going to be a captain on this year's team for the Hoosiers. I think he's going to anchor that offensive line unit. So I'm going with Carter Smith. Not for the NFL draft projection because I don't care about what people go on and do at the next level. I just think that he's going to be a really, really strong player for the Hoosiers this year. Anchor that team.
I dig that. I am going with Trevor Lauk from Iowa. I think he's an outstanding player. I think he was arguably the best lineman for the team that won the Joe Moore Award. Obviously, Jennings Dunker got a lot of the love last year, rightfully so. Jennings Dunker was a heck of a player for Iowa last year. I believe he went on to be a second-round draft pick, Trev, I believe, last year. Let me look up Jennings' statistics last year.
Was.
But Jennings Dunker last year, he was third-round draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers last season. Was considered the top lineman for Iowa last year on a team that won the Joe Moore Award. And, of course, he's a media star. He's got the big red hair and, all those type of things. He was a first-team All-Big Ten pick last year, all that type of stuff. I'm still going Trevor Lauk. I actually think Trevor Lauk was their best lineman last year. Jennings Dunker is a heck of a player. Don't get me wrong, but I think Trevor Lauk is an outstanding football player. He was third-team All-Big Ten last year. I think he was underrated. Just looking at the PFF numbers, for example, last year, Trev, Jennings Dunker last year gave up 10 pressures, including 2 sacks and a hit on the quarterback. Trevor Lauk last year, playing only 28 fewer pass rush snaps, only gave up 6 sacks or 6 pressure, only 6 sacks. Brian, I don't think you're making the point you think you are. Only gave up 6 pressures all year, no sacks and 2 hits on the quarterback trap. And it was his first year as a starter. He's only going to get better. I think he's an absolute dude at left tackle for Iowa. So I think Carter Smith pick, love that pick. There's other guys you could go with,
Sure.
But I think Trevor Lauk is the best offensive lineman in the Big Ten.
I like that. Yeah.
What say you on defense there, Mr. Trowbridge? This was a tough one. Especially for you, because I can't use Anthony Smith. So I'm curious to see where you go. It was tougher for me because I can't use Anthony Smith. I'm very curious where you go. Do we see the Anthony Smith discussion here? Are you going another direction, Trev? You're going to shock me again. I've been loving this.
I love Anthony Smith, but this one, and I will say before I give my answer, this was a massive projection on my part, which is very difficult for me to do. I was very brave in projecting because I'm Mr. I got to see it. But in all seriousness, I went with Edric Houston at Ohio State.
Oh, you're calling the breakout. Yeah.
I am. Here's why. I think if Ohio State, because I don't have a lot of concerns about them on the edge. I love the point that you always bring up about, look, it's not about comparing him to last year and last year's defensive line. It's
Right.
can you be good for this year's defensive line? I have faith in Kenyatta Jackson. Yeah, I have faith in other edge's name is escaping me.
Bo
Bo
Atkinson.
Atkinson. Yeah, thank you.
Right. And I've read he's
But
had a really good fall camp, which takes some pressure off that young DN that they were all trying
yes,
to jump up there, and I think that's good. But yeah, Larry Johnson will get whoever's out there ready to go.
absolutely. Here's why I picked Edric Houston. I don't love that initially they were putting a bunch of weight into Tim Smith. Of like if he comes over from Bama and this is going to be James Smith, he's going to be just this huge, success for us. And it's like, well, the concerns that I would have had about him were the same concerns that I had about Keon Keeley of having to kind of break him down before you can build him back up. But Keon Keeley's not being relied upon to start.
Right.
Whereas for Ohio State, James Smith would have been called upon to start. I think Edric Houston's emergence could solidify the interior of that defensive line. And I have Ohio State going undefeated in conference up until their rematch with Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. If they're going to do that, the interior of their D line needs to be shored up, and I think Edric Houston can provide that for them. Again, massive projection forward, but that's who I ended up going with.
And he's going into his third year. I mean, I think that matters, Trev. I think it matters when you talk about a guy kind of going into year three. If you look at him last year, he ranked last year. Let's see, Edric Houston. He had 158 pass rush snaps. He only had 9 pressures, but like 5 of them, according to PFF, were sacks. Like he could get to the quarterback. It's that consistency that came with being a young player.
Yeah.
Now he's going into year 3, and year 3 being coached by Larry Johnson. I think if the breakout's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. So I like that projection pick. Mine was Amari Washington. I just think he's the most dominant player in the league, physically dominant. I think one thing that surprised me a little bit about him is he had decent production for his size and the role that he plays. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and have 15 tackles for loss because he's more Jordan Davis than he is. Like a penetrator, but 4.5 tackles for loss last year. But he's an absolute force up the middle of that defense. I think he's the most. You have to put so much into stopping him. I think Jason Rose in the chat also had Amari Washington. So I thought I was just going to be this. I've got it, man. I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'm tied with Jason Rose. He's the other one. So good choice, Jason. But yeah, I'm going to go with Amari Washington.
Yeah, I like that pick. Who do you have for the top skilled player on offense?
So Jeremiah Smith is already off the board. There's a lot of good options here, but at the end of the day, I'm going with KJ Duff, the wide receiver from Rutgers. I mean, when you look at what he did last year with a quarterback that I don't really think much of, Trev, that the kid that transferred from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And, barely 62% completion rate. I just think a lot of success they had last year was because of KJ Duff. 60 catches, 1,084 yards, 7 touchdowns. They had some portal pickups this year that allowed him. He was very good against Penn State, 5 catches, 127 yards, had 6 catches for 241 yards against Purdue, 9 for 93 against Iowa, 6 for 84 against Minnesota, 7 for 92 against Iowa. Something to me that was a stat that stood out to me. He's got to get better against some of the better teams. Ohio State, he had 2 catches for 34 yards. Against Oregon, he had 3 for 41. Those were the 2 best secondaries in the Big Ten, in my opinion, last year. So yeah, he'll need to play better than them. But I love him with Dylan Lonergan. If they can just help. If they can get Dylan Lonergan back to looking like he did the first month of last season. And remember, you could argue his best game was against a Big Ten team. He shredded Michigan State in that game for BC. I just love the idea of Dylan Lonergan and KJ Duff coming together and doing some beautiful things this year for Rutgers on offense. And that's partly why I have Rutgers a little higher than you, Trev. I know you had Rutgers 17. I had them 13 because I think they're going to pull off a couple upset wins this year, including one over a team from out west that whose mascot is known for being wiped off the face of the earth by a bunch of Greeks. So, yeah. So that's why we no longer know where their capital is, because they were wiped out.
Well, Brian, their Odyssey's beginning. You forget.
Right, exactly. Their Odyssey towards being irrelevant, like their namesake. So, yes, Trev, I like this. I'm really big fan of that pick. There's a lot you can go with, but I'm going KJ Duff. I think he's going to be a dude this year.
I like it. No suspense for me on this one. It's Jeremiah Smith as the top skilled player in the league. I think he's in a league above the rest when it comes to being a wide receiver. There are really good choices at wide receiver. Jeremiah Smith's a dude. He's the only guy on FanDuel in their top 14 that's in the Heisman favorites. That's not a quarterback. I mean, he's an absolute dude.
Just a reminder, since you went with Jeremiah Smith, for those who might have joined the show late, Jeremiah Smith was not eligible for me to pick as the top skill player because I used him as my top overall offensive player. Some guy's like, this dude knows what he's talking about, but that moron in the gray shirt didn't even go with Jeremiah Smith as the top skill player? What are you on drugs? Didn't you say you used to coach receiver? Jeremiah Smith was not eligible for this one for me, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that because I picked him as the top offensive player in the league. So I just want to get that out there, Trev. Just want to get that out there.
Totally
just so we're on the
fair.
same page. So, yes, let's go top skill player on defense, Trev. Who you got?
Brandon Finney, young cornerback from Oregon. I really liked what I saw from him last year. That's why I'm very much looking forward to that matchup. Hopefully we get to see it twice in the Big Ten Championship and then obviously in the regular season. Brandon Finney, or honestly, Ife Obadegwu against Jeremiah Smith when you play Ohio State. You really could have gone with either corner. I'm going with Brandon Finney. Young guy last year, goes into his sophomore year this year. I think he's due for a big, big season. So
you could have gone with either guy. They were both good. Last year, Brandon Finney, as I believe a true freshman, correct? Yeah, he was a true freshman last year. Was targeted 50 times, held opponents to only 20 catches. So that's a 40% completion rate. Gave up 303 yards. Did give up some big plays. Has to tackle better, but gave up 1 touchdown all year, 3 interceptions and 3 breakups as a true freshman. That's really good numbers. Yeah. Really, really good numbers. And, look, Indiana got him pretty good in the playoff game, completed 3 balls on him in the playoff game, but I thought in the regular season he was a lot better. They completed 1 pass on him for 4 catches. Their D-line did nothing against Indiana. I don't fault their secondary and Fernando Mendoza was really good in that game.
Yeah.
But, I thought he played well in some of their bigger moments last year. I really like that kid. He's a good player. He's a good player. Is that the only one that we had the same? Yeah, it's the only one we've had the same pickup so far. I dig it. All right, Trev, wrapping up the Big Ten prediction show with the top coach. Who is your coach of the year in the Big Ten? I don't even want to say mine because if you look at my rankings, it's a kind of an obvious choice, and I don't even want the words to come out of my mouth. So why don't you say who my top pick is after you're done explaining who you're picking?
Well, my top pick for coach of the year, and some of this was actually kind of difficult for me because I'm going through and I'm looking at previous winners, and I don't know who to pick. And I landed on Kyle Whittingham at Michigan, and mostly for the storylines and the program that he took over. I have Michigan finishing 4th overall in the league. I think there's a lot of people that think they take a big step back. Ward Manuel announces that he's stepping down at the end of this year. You have all that mess with Sharon Moore. And I think Kyle Whittingham is going to come in and really, really steady the ship. Some of that, too, also went into I don't think Kurt Cignetti wins it for a 3rd year in a row. If Dan Lanning, his first year in conference, going undefeated and winning the Big Ten isn't enough to win him coach of the year. I don't know if anything that he does by losing the Big Ten champion or winning the Big Ten championship this year in my projection is enough to get him named that. Then with Ryan Day, it's kind of like I don't know what more he could do this year to show that he's the best coach in the Big Ten outside of things that he's already done. So some of it with me was a little bit of process of elimination, but I ended up landing on Kyle Whittingham at Michigan for just being able to come in, show signs of life from this program, steady the ship, and kind of be the one constant in just what has been a crazy back office offseason for them.
Yeah, he's there's a lot he's having to fix beyond just getting the football team squared away. A lot more.
And unfortunately, Brian, I'll do you the favor of doing this one.
I can't even.
In the theme of who was in Brian's top 5, his coach of the year in the Big Ten is PJ Fleck.
Look, the coach whose name shall not be mentioned, you finish 4th in the Big Ten, you're going to be the coach of the year. If I'm right about where he's ranked this year,
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, how do you not go with him? in my opinion. Yeah,
Agreed.
that's where I'm at. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I don't like it, but it is what it is.
But if
It
your
is what it
projection's
is.
correct, then yeah, he would be. I'm with you on the pick.
Yeah,
Both of
exactly.
our
I have to. Despite
yeah.
look, this goes to show I don't pick against someone just because I don't like them. I do not like this guy at all. But it's what it is. Here's my sneaky sleeper pick. If Maryland has the jump I think they're capable of, which is better than where we have them predict, I said they're my sleeper team to jump into the top 5. If I'm right about Maryland, or not if I'm right, because I'm not. If I was predicting they'd be my top 5, but if they are that sleeper team, if they have where everything kind of goes right for them, and Malik Washington's that dude, if they finish in the top 5 of the Big Ten, which I think you and I think they have an outside shot at doing, everything's gonna have to go right. Then I think he's my pick because that would be quite the jump. He'd be my other sleeper candidate for that. But I also like the Whittingham pick. There's some good options. There's some good options in there.
Not even going to give my sleeper pick because I refuse to speak that into existence.
Okay, you got to text me who that is, so I understand. I know. Actually, I bet I know who it is. Is it about the team that I was just talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yep.
Because
all right, Trev. Yeah, go ahead.
Look, if they are the team that people believe them to be, it's kind of like how you feel about PJ Fleck. Then it's kind of like, how do you not go in that direction, sort of deal.
Ugh. I get that. Ugh. I get that. Yeah, I get that. Well, that'll do it, Trev, for the Big Ten predictions.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting.
Brian, let's dive into our predictions for the SEC here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We just got done breaking down the Big Ten. Now it's time to turn it to the league that some say means a little bit more, but we do believe that they are in for a bounce back year this year. Last couple seasons, were the deepest league in college football. I think that was by namesake only. This year, however, especially when we were going through and predicting the schedule, I do think that this is going to be an exceptionally deep year in the SEC.
Agree. I think that, look, there's a couple reasons why you and I have talked about it all summer. Some of the reasons why are, number one, I think offensive line play is going to be improved to some places. I think quarterback play is going to be improved across the league. And I think the coaching in the league has improved over the last couple of years with some of the new hires that have been brought into the league, even at places that are smaller schools. Like, I think Mississippi State's a team to watch out for this year, as a team that could pull off some upsets, because I like that Jeff Lebby hire. They battled last year. And so I just think the overall quality of the league is better this year. You replace what I think was a bad coach and a bad person in Hugh Freeze with Alex Golesh. That's an upgrade. You replace Billy Napier with John Sumrall. That's an upgrade. I just, look, Lane Kiffin over Brian Kelly. That's an upgrade at LSU. Now, Pete Golding at Ole Miss is a downgrade, but that's one of the few downgrades. We'll see what Mark Stein or what Will Stein is over, Mark Stoops. We'll see if that's an upgrade or not. That remains to be seen. But, Clark Lee, I think, is, what he's done in the league. He's a good football coach. We both think they're going to take a little bit of a step back this year, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast a little bit. So, the league has upgraded in coaching in recent years. Adding Mike Elko to the league in recent years is something that, is a positive as well. So I think all those things factor into why this league, in my opinion, is ascending from where it was in recent years. The last couple of years.
I would say coaching elevation, and honestly a quarterback elevation. I mean, I think it's some of the premier teams in the SEC that I think are going to have better quarterback play this year. Alabama's going from Ty Simpson to Keelan Russell. I thought Joey McGuire was a good quarterback last year for Tennessee. I like the ceiling of Faison Brandon. I think Ole Miss is going into year 2 of the Trinidad Chambliss era. Arch Manning is going into year 2. Gunnar Stockton's going into like year 2.5-ish. Now, he barely started in 24, but he came in and finished up in the SEC championship game, and then his first career start was against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. So that's where it's at for me. I think quarterback play and coaching is going to be huge.
I dig it. Let's get into our predictions, Trevor.
Let's do it.
It's going to be fun. We're going to go 4 at a time. We'll 4-4. 3 and 5 is kind of how we're going to break this one up. So let's get into it.
Let's do it. So my 16 through 13, getting us kicked off here at 16, I have the Arkansas Razorbacks. Number 15, I have Mississippi State. 14, I have Vanderbilt. 13, I have Kentucky.
We have the same number 16. I also have the Arkansas Razorbacks. I have the South Carolina Gamecocks at number 15, Vanderbilt at 14, and Mississippi State at 13. Unlike the Big Ten, Trev, we have 3 of the same bottom 4 in the SEC, including 2 teams in the exact same spot.
Yeah, look, of all of the good coaching hires that we really liked in the SEC, Ryan Silverfield going to Arkansas was not one of them. I don't think he's going to be a bad coach. I don't know if they necessarily go 2-10. Of all the hires, you're getting John Summerall in at Florida, you're getting Alex Golesh in at Auburn. That hire did nothing to me. And then when I evaluate their roster, the talent on it is not even what it was last year, and they struggled last year mightily. So I have Arkansas there. I mean, not high on the Razorbacks this year, man.
I'm with you. Let's get to 12 to would be 12 to 9.
Yep, 12 to 9. Yes, sir. So my number 12 team, I have the Florida Gators. At 11, I have the Missouri Tigers. 10, I have Texas A&M, and 9, I have South Carolina.
Can't wait to get into your South Carolina thoughts, Trev, but let me give mine here real quick. I have Kentucky at number 12. So going back to the previous list, Trev had Kentucky at 13, Adam at 12. So again, get to the bottom. We're similar. I have Missouri. He has Missouri. So we're in a very similar place. We have one big difference in the bottom 12. Auburn at 10, Texas A&M at 9. I think the fact that we've got A&M, Auburn, and Missouri at 9 to 11 shows exactly how deep this league is going to be this year.
Yeah,
because I don't think those teams are going to be bad. I think those teams are actually going to win a lot of their non-conference games. It just speaks to how deep I believe the league is going to be this year.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's also why I'll give you a little sneak peek that I will have a 3-loss team in the college football playoff this year on Friday.
I actually, based on how I view this panning out, I will as well. Once everything's all factored together, I will as well.
Yep.
So I'm with you completely.
So yeah, that's my. I was really thinking like, dude, I'm gonna get ripped because I have A&M so low. You have them one spot lower. So let's talk about our bottom 12, Trev, real quick. Missouri. Look, I think this Missouri team is a good team. I think the tragedy with Ahmad Hardy, I do expect him to play at some point in time this year from what I've read, but he's still not practicing. And at this point in time, I don't really care about football, that young man. I mean, he was shot this summer, and it was not some like minor graze on, flesh wound type of thing. It was a very bad situation, and I just want him to, get himself right. Kentucky at 12 and 13. I like what Will Stein has done on offense. Offensive line, he did well getting Kenny Minchie. I don't know that their skill talent is such that they're going to be climbed much higher, and I don't know that their defense is going to be all that good this year. But they've been very competitive in recent years, but that was also competitive with a coach who could get the defense going but couldn't get the offense going. Can Will Stein do both? That's going to be a big question for them. And I do think Kentucky will be better. They'll be more competitive. But part of the issue I have with Kentucky, Trevor, it really comes down to, I think they have a pretty rough schedule. They've got to play at Texas A&M, at South Carolina, at Oklahoma, at Tennessee, and at Missouri. And then their home slate is Bama, LSU, Vanderbilt, and Florida. So I actually have Kentucky as a team that is better than their ranking because that is a brutal schedule for a team that's trying to rebuild. Really brutal.
Yep. We view Kentucky very much the same. That's why I had them at 13th. That schedule's nasty. That's also why I had Texas A&M at 10. I think the ending to their schedule is a gauntlet. Like, people want to know, well, what do you view as a gauntlet schedule? I look at Texas A&M's end of the season. They get on the road against Alabama and then a bye, and then on the road at South Carolina, home against Tennessee, on the road against Oklahoma, and then they wrap up, obviously, with their rivalry game against Texas on a Friday.
Yeah.
That is a tough way to end, but I think their losses in the trenches compiled over 2 years was not enough for me to project forward, and I don't think that they have that true difference maker at quarterback to overcome the amount of losses that they had on the offensive line. I think Marcel Reed is a good quarterback. Having said that, I think he just kind of is who he is. And he was who he was last year with that good offensive line. So I'm not high on Texas A&M this year.
No, I'm not either. And I don't love what they did in the portal. They went out and got guys from the league, but they weren't exactly dominant players. I think the receiving core is going to be very good. Their running back room is solid. But uh, I just don't love the pickups they made. I like the Wilcom Formby kid, but they're projecting on Tyree Adams making a giant jump this year, and Cohen Eccles making a giant jump this year, and Trayvon Ball making a giant jump. But it's not just there. They also lost a lot from their defense. Now, they played a lot of guys up front, so DJ Hicks played a lot, and Anto Sako was a great pickup from Northwestern. But I just don't love what they've got on defense. I think their secondary is going to be solid, but not great. And I think Texas A&M is a really tough schedule. That's part of it too. It's not always just about like, you guys think they're the ninth, 10th best team in the league. No, I think they're going to rank ninth. They've got to play at LSU, at Missouri, at Bama, at South Carolina, and at Oklahoma. They're one of those 4 and 5 teams this year where they've got 4 home and 5 away. They haven't been great away from home in recent years. Now, that sounds ironic coming from a Notre Dame person, but we're talking about in the league, and we said a million times, Notre Dame gave them that game. Their home slate is much more manageable, but that's kind of a problem. They got Kentucky at home, Arkansas at home, and Tennessee at home, and then Texas at home. It's kind of like I'd rather have it reversed. I'd rather play at Kentucky and at Arkansas and get LSU and Bama at home if I was Texas A&M. So a lot of this is about schedule. I think they have a very tough schedule and the ending of their season. So they play the Citadel on the 17th, which is an absolute joke to play an FCS team. Their last 5 games are at Alabama, at South Carolina, home against Tennessee, and then their last 2 games at Oklahoma and home against Texas, who I believe will be 2 teams that are fighting for their playoff lives in those games. And I just don't think they're going to have the horses to win those games. So they're going to get off to a pretty decent start, in my opinion, but they're going to fade down the stretch, which, let's be honest, for all the great things that Mike Elko has done, they have not been a great late season team. His first year at A&M, 1-3 in November, blown out by South Carolina, lost to a bad Auburn team, lost to Texas, and then, of course, lost the bowl game, which I don't care. And then last year, they went 3-1 in November, lost to Texas again, but their wins were over a Missouri team that was fading, Samford, and then they had that crazy come-from-behind win over South Carolina in a game that was as much about South Carolina choking another game away as it was about anything A&M did. You shouldn't have been down that big to begin with. You do that this year in November when you're playing Bama, South Carolina on the road this time, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Texas, you aren't coming back in those games. And Mike Elko's done some good things. Oh, and by the way, they lost at home in the playoff to Miami, 10-3. So they don't play well down the stretch, and this is the most brutal stretch run that they've had. Bama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Texas to finish the season. That's brutal. That's why I have the Aggies down low. I have a feeling, Trev, that's where you are.
Yep, it's exactly where I'm at with them. It's completely where I'm at.
Yep. Let's talk about the Gamecocks, Trev. You have them 9th. I think based on the roster and schedule, I get you. I just feel like they're a team they're going to be the SEC team that basically folds. That's how I see. That's why I have South Carolina where I have them.
Totally fair. You get 0 pushback from me on that one because that's my major concern with them. But I look at the talent on this roster. Where I landed with South Carolina is, okay, in 2024, you went in, 9-4, and they were complaining about how they should have been in the playoffs, even though nobody thought that they should have been outside of Gamecocks fans.
Outside of the SEC country, yes.
Right. Then last year you go 4-8, but then you had that game against Alabama that you should not have lost if it wasn't for a terrible coaching decision of letting them score, which whatever. Mm-hmm. Then you
on third down where it would have been a 40-something yard field goal and Bama had a bad kicker. One of the dumbest coaching decisions ever. Trev was nice about it. I'm not going to be nice about it. That was one of the dumbest coaches' decisions I've ever seen in my life.
It was bad. Where I landed with South Carolina this year is I have them going somewhere in between their 24 season and their 25 season. Overall record, I have them at 7-5, going 4-5 in conference, but picking up enough big wins to warrant them just making it inside of the top 10 in the conference. It's going to be a very South Carolina-esque season, and I think their talent is going to get them a lot of wins. I have them losing on the road to Alabama, losing on the road to Florida, losing on the road to Tennessee, on the road at Oklahoma, but I also have them beating Texas A&M at home, and I have them upsetting Georgia at the end of the season as well, just because of the level of talent that they have on their roster. But it's going to be a very much like we're going to look back on this and be like Shane Beamer could have went 10-2, 9-3, yet they end 7-5, and that's where the inconsistencies come in. But they do also have to look at Lenore Sellers is a year older, Nick Harbor's a year older, Dylan Stewart's a year older. So I think the talent in there. I think the narrative around South Carolina this year is going to be they won some games in spite of their head coach.
Yeah, I just agree. They've got some great athletes. I just look at it. I think their schedule at Bama, at Florida, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, home games against Mississippi State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Georgia. Pretty rough slate for them as well. I think factors into it. If they get upset in early in the season, I think they kind of fold down the stretch, which then puts games like at Arkansas in doubt. And that's kind of how I see that one going. Trev, that's definitely where I see that one going. So let's dive into 8 through 6.
Yeah, my number 8 team, I have the Ole Miss Rebels. Number 7, I have the Auburn Tigers. And at number 6, I have the LSU Tigers.
My 8 through 6, Trev, we're almost the same. I have Florida 8, 7 LSU, 6 Ole Miss. Let's just kind of get here about Auburn. The reason I have Auburn lower, it's just simply about schedule. I think Auburn plays a really, really tough schedule this year, and I think that's, with a lot of new players, I think that's the reason I have them a little bit lower. They have to play at Tennessee, at Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Mississippi State, at Alabama, and then their home games are Florida, Vanderbilt, LSU, and Arkansas. So like a more manageable home slate, but those are some tough games. I think they're going to be one of those teams that goes like 7-5. And they're undefeated in their league, and they're like, boy, if that team could have made that one stop or that one play, or, we're having a different conversation, which then allows them to go in the offseason from a recruiting standpoint and say, hey, this is why we need you. It takes over the top. But I think they're going to be one of those teams that's 7-5, and you're like, that's why the SEC is good. Like what they said about that win over Auburn last year, which was total BS, could be actually a legitimate excuse for a closer game this year. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I see that one. But that's why I have Auburn at 10, Trev. You have them higher than I do. So let's talk about that. What do you see from the Tigers?
Did you have Auburn going 7-5? Was that like your prediction for them?
I believe so. I have to go look at it, but I believe so. I have
them going 8-4, and it's because I'm willing to project the upset win over Alabama at the end of the year. I have a feeling that we had their schedule pretty much panning out the same, but I have Auburn upsetting Alabama.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I have them losing to Bama. Yeah, that would explain it.
Yeah, in the closest of the league, that's the difference between 7 and 10 is literally one game, and so we see them very much the same. I predicted the upset.
Mm-hmm.
So, but breaking down the team, I agree with everything that you said about them. I think that they're going to put themselves in a position this year to go out and get those big-time portal players. I'll tell you a team to keep your eye out on, or a player to keep your eye out on. If Maryland doesn't do well, but Malik Washington balls out, I would be hard-pressed to believe that Alex Golesh and his staff are not going to make a run at Malik Washington after what I think Byron Brown is going to do in this league this year. So that's something I'd keep my eye out on too. But, yeah, I'm with you.
Like Byron Brown quite a bit. Like him quite a bit. Look, LSU 6 and 7. Let's talk about the Tigers. I know everybody's in their feelings about what they're doing over the last couple days. We have a lot of mailbag questions about that. We'll get into that then. Let's just talk about why we have LSU 6 and 7 in the league. A lot of people have them higher. 6 and 7 could have them in the top 25. First of all, there's a couple concerns I have about them. I don't love their offensive line. I know there's a lot of their line's going to be so good. I don't love their offensive line. How quickly that comes together is going to, it's going to be interesting. They have a very deep receiving core, but I wonder, do they have anybody take over game guys, which you don't necessarily need if you got a big time quarterback, but you and I aren't big Sam Levitt fans. So I think there is going to be a bit of a transition year for LSU on offense. I do. I think they're going to be good on offense, but I don't think it's till next year that they really take that jump. They're also relying on 3 true freshmen in their D-line rotation because they're a bit thin there. There's some good starters there. Obviously, they've went to the portal and got Malik Blockton. They got Stephylon Green. They got some decent players. There's a chance they could add some former NFL players in their roster over the next couple days. I'm just going to wait to see how all that plays out first. And then so like there's good talent at linebacker. They got one of the better cornerback tandems in the SEC this year, or at least what we project will be one of the better cornerback tandems this year with DJ Pickett and PJ Woodland. I have some questions about their safety position, and so I just look at it, Trevor, and say this is going to be an improved team. I could see LSU going 8-4 this year, and you look at it and say they're a better team than they were last year. They're a better team than they were the year before that. Just because I do think this is going to be a good football team, but at the end of the day, some of those questions, the transition lane Kiffin, and then, of course, here's their schedule. This is just their conference schedule. At Ole Miss, home against Texas A&M, at Kentucky, home against Mississippi State, at Auburn, home against Bama, home against Texas, at Tennessee, and at Arkansas. That's a rough schedule. Rough schedule for LSU. And to me, it's all going to come down to, can they come out of the Ole Miss A&M game at least 1-1? And can they beat Clemson? If they can beat Clemson, come out at 1-1, they may end up being a little better than we think. They can go on the road and beat an Auburn. They can go on the road and beat a Tennessee. And now we're talking about a maybe 10-2 Bama team or LSU teams fight for the playoff spot. They're going to be tested early. They have one of the toughest Septembers in all of college football. And that's just kind of like, boy, I would feel better about them pulling a couple wins out in September. You're more than a couple wins out in September if they were doing that in November. But like just doing that out of the gate is going to be tough. But if they do, then this team's going to be better than I think they're going to be.
Yeah, I'm with you. I went floor with LSU, but this was, as far as floor goes, this was a pretty easy projection because their head coach kind of gave us the nod of like, hey, man, we're still a work in progress. We're not going to come out and, you have SEC pundits on media day talking about how, they have to win the national title this year. It's like, disagree completely. Sure. I mean, shoot, even FanDuel has LSU of the third best odds to win the conference. And there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think LSU is going to be a good football team. That's why I went with the floor here. Would not shock me if they were higher than 6 where I have them or 7 where you have them. But I'm not willing to project that as far yet because there is a lot of moving parts. They have like 35 transfers that they're going to be relying on across the 2 deep in both offense and defense. It's a huge area to evaluate. Now, I think they have the right head coach in place, but I have a lot of questions about him too. We'll see where it pans out.
Yep, going to be interesting. To me, the Ole Miss over LSU simply comes down to schedule. Ole Miss has a tough schedule, but it's just not as tough as LSU, and they play each other early in the year in Oxford. If LSU wins that game, I have Ole Miss dropping hard. That's going to be a big game for them. So that's going to be a very interesting early season game, Trev.
I have Ole Miss dropping that game. That's why I have them below LSU.
I think if they drop that game, they'll finish even lower than 8th. Because here's the thing. They are a top 10 team nationally in a 7-on-7 league. They're all, whether you think about Trinidad Chambliss or not, I think he's a really good college quarterback. There's a reason he fought so hard to come back to college because he's not a top NFL prospect. There's no way he's trying to get back into this draft class if he was going to be picked high last year. No way. He'd be like, dude, I'm going to this draft class. I mean, Ty Simpson was a top 15 pick. You know what I mean? But look, he's not a big-time NFL prospect in my opinion. But he's going to have Kawan Lacey. Deuce Alexander comes back. They got Darryl Gill Jr. and Jonte Cook, who Steve Angeli worked some magic with early last season. You got them out of the portal. You got Luke Haas coming back. You've got other portal pickups. You've got some young players stepping up. And their D-line, their front 7 should be really good. My concerns for them, I don't like their offensive line, and I got question marks about whether or not they can cover on the back end. That's my big concern for LSU, or for Ole Miss this year.
Same.
Let's get our top 5, Trev.
At number 5 in the SEC, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. Number 4, I have Tennessee. At 3, I have Texas. 2, I have Oklahoma. And up top, I got the Georgia Bulldogs.
My top 5, Trev, we have the same 5 teams, just different order. I have the Tennessee Volunteers at number 5, the Alabama Crimson Tide at number 4, the Oklahoma Sooners at 3, the Texas Longhorns at 2, and the Georgia Bulldogs at 1. Let's talk about it. We have Tennessee and Alabama at 4 and 5, Trev. We have the same order there, and the same order, or we have the same teams there, the same teams at 2 and 3, but we have them flipped. Let's first talk about Tennessee and Alabama. Obviously, that's pretty high for Tennessee. I'm actually a little surprised that we both had them high, especially them naming a true freshman at quarterback. But outside of the question marks at quarterback, he's talented, but he's a true freshman. There's a lot to like about this Tennessee team.
When I was breaking down Tennessee, there were things that I wanted to hold off on to see who they were going to go with at quarterback. And one thing that I was very hesitant about was if they named George McIntyre the quarterback. I think he has a higher floor, obviously, right now because he's a more experienced player, but I think Faison Brandon has a higher ceiling. That was enough for me to project them forward of how their season was going to play out. Then, thankfully for Tennessee, they get to ease into their season a little bit in the first 3 games. Conference play, there's no break. Their first conference opponent is Texas. Okay, that's going to be a tough matchup for them, but I love all the supporting pieces around him. But Faison Brandon's going to be able to cut his teeth on Furman on the road against Georgia Tech, which is a P4 team, and then you're back at home against Kennesaw State. And so those are some of the things that I really like about Tennessee. For me, having Alabama behind Tennessee came down to one thing, and I go back to that upset in the Iron Bowl at the end of the season. If I didn't project that, Alabama would have been at 4, Tennessee would have been at 5. It's just how the record shook out in conference. But I'm really high on Tennessee this year. Love all the pieces that they come back. A lot of my hesitation with them up to this point, really up to yesterday, was who they were going to name at quarterback, and now we have the answer to that.
That's right. I think their schedule is also favorable. They have some tough teams on it, but they get Texas at home, they get Auburn at home, they get Bama at home, they get LSU at home. And their tough road games are against teams that I don't think, or their road games are against teams that I don't think are that strong. They play at Arkansas. They play at South Carolina. They play at Texas A&M, which will be tough, and at Vanderbilt. That's 3 of the teams that I have lowest in the league. So they get 5. They're a 5 home game, 4 road game team, and they have winnable road games. Where a lot of teams on here are going to have way tougher. Tennessee going 2-2 on the road is going to be a whole lot easier than LSU going 2-2 on the road, in my opinion. And then look, they're going to have to pull an upset off of a Texas or Alabama. They got to beat one of those 2 teams, and I have them beating one of those 2 teams. In Alabama, to me, Trev, they're either going to finish 4th or they're going to finish outside the top 7. I don't think I don't see them being 5th, 6th. I think they're going to be top 4 because they make the corrections they need to make, or they drop hard. But one thing that does help Bama this year, their schedule is far more manageable. They play Georgia, but they get Georgia at home. They don't play Texas. They don't play Oklahoma. They play Tennessee on the road, but they get South Carolina at home, Georgia at home, Texas A&M at home, Auburn at home. Their road games are Mississippi State, Tennessee, which will be tough, LSU, which will be tough, and then Vanderbilt on the road as well. So, again, I think their schedule is a lot more manageable than some other teams. That's partly why I have them 4th. But if they struggle and try to be the same team that they were last year, all of a sudden there's some upsets that I could see happening with them. I could see them having a similar issue in Vanderbilt that they had 2 years ago. I could have them seeing an issue when they go down, over to Starkville and play Mississippi State and Camario Taylor, who will upset somebody. They will beat somebody in the top 5 this year. So that's where I'm at with the Crimson Tide. With Tennessee, it's just there's going to be a game they lose that they shouldn't because of their quarterback, and then there's going to be a couple games they win because of their quarterback, because Faison Brandon's a very talented kid, and they have very talented weapons around him and a very good offensive line around them. I also am higher on their defense than a lot of people. I think their defense has a bounce back year too. But look, they've got a team built to run the football. Deshaun Bishop's one of the best backs in the league, and I think their offensive line is going to be a really good run blocking line this year. I think David Sanders is going to have a really strong season now as a sophomore, former 5-star kid. There's a lot to like about this Tennessee team that maybe gets overshadowed because of their question marks at quarterback.
Agreed. I'm very high on Tennessee.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I'm high on Tennessee. Thoughts on Alabama? I think that they're not going to make the corrections that they do, but their schedule panned out to where it's like that. I just think that they're going to have the talent to not get upset by one of those teams. Wouldn't shock me if it happened if they don't make those corrections. I just have zero faith in Kane Womack. I think Alabama's upset. Like I said, it's going to come against Auburn at the end of the year. But I like the talent that they have. I'm glad that they named Keelan Russell the starting quarterback because I think he has the higher ceiling than what Austin Mack did. But their schedule, to your point, allows them to ease into the season a little bit. You know, you get South Carolina, but it's at home. Florida State, who knows what to expect from them, and you have East Carolina and at Kentucky to start the season. I actually have them beating Georgia at home, not necessarily for how I view Alabama. It's just until Kirby Smart can show me he can beat Alabama in the regular season, I'm not going to predict it because he can't. He didn't do it in 2024. He didn't do it last year, and I don't see him doing it this year, especially going into Tuscaloosa. So I think that's going to be a big piece too. Where I have Alabama starting to struggle is in the latter part of their schedule. I have them losing to Tennessee on the road. I actually have them losing to LSU on the road. And then, like I said, I predicted that upset against Auburn. So that's how I view the Tide. They have all the talent in the world to be in the top three. It's just I need to see Kalen DeBoer make the necessary adjustments schematically. Then I need to see Kane Womack just have a completely he needs a blood transfusion to be a different defensive coordinator. But that is what it is.
Agree. I do think he has a little bit of a better roster this year. That's something that I think helps us a little bit as well. Here's my thing on Alabama and Tennessee. I also think that those teams betting on the more talented quarterback is going to pay off for them both.
Yeah.
Going with Keelan Russell, whether I would have done it or not, I think going with him, number one, shows that Keelan took that jump necessary. I don't think if there was this giant gap between him and Austin Mack that they would have gone with him as a starter. I think he made the improvements. He's an elite talent. I think Faison Brandon, similar thing, big-time talent. And they're, hey, look, we're going to have to live with some of these mistakes. I really just hope that they at least early try and just have some semblance of balance early to take some of the pressure off that kid. Even if it's just running him a little bit. You know, run some bootlegs where he can tuck it and run if there's nobody open. Just make it simple.
You're talking Alabama?
Alabama, yeah. Well, both of them really, but I think actually Tennessee will run the ball. We've seen Josh Heupel more than willing to run the football. That was the main thing they did when Nico was their quarterback. It's more so Tennessee. With Alabama, it's just try to run the ball. With Tennessee, I think they're built to ease him in more than what Alabama is. Alabama has to adjust to ease Keelan Russell in, but Keelan Russell's also in year 2. But I think he's going to be a big time player. I really do. Let's talk about Oklahoma and Texas, Trevor. You got the Longhorns 3 and the Sooners 2. Let's talk about why you have Texas falling, because I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have the separator for me, because when I panned it out, they have the same exact record. They both go 10-2. They both go 7-2 in conference. I just have Oklahoma with the win over Texas in the in the Red River Shootout. So that was the separator for me. But I'm exceptionally high on Oklahoma this year. I like their defense. Really love what they bring back on the offensive side of the ball. I think offensive line takes a step forward this year. I think they have one of the better backfields. Some of this was a projection for me with John Mateer returning back to his pre-injury form. But now that he's had an entire offseason of health, and he is now significantly removed from his hand injury, I think he bounces back this year. Love the portal additions that they brought in on the offensive side of the ball as well.
I understand why a lot of fans aren't as high on John Mateer. I get it. I watched him play last year too. I watched him play in the playoff. I understand all of it. Where I think people are missing the boat is they maybe didn't watch him at Washington State. And again, I don't think he's a world beater. I don't think they're going to be good because John Mateer's this elite player. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, however, is that he's a better quarterback than what we saw last year. They rushed him back way too soon. He couldn't run the offense. He couldn't run. They didn't use him as a runner for a chunk of the season. He developed some very bad habits. Now, my big concern with John Mateer is also he put on a lot of muscle this offseason, and that sometimes concerns me about a quarterback. But when I look at Oklahoma last year, Trev, and I look at the team they are, that I think John Mateer is just going to be a better quarterback than that. I also think the receiving core, he had Isaiah Satanga, who was a really good player, but after that, it was a solid receiving core. It wasn't great. Jaron Canick was a good tight end. But you had Deion Burks, who's a solid player. Keontez Lewis, who's an okay player. Javani Gibson, who's an okay player. That's all they had. They went out this offseason and put together an absolutely outstanding portal class. So first of all, you get Satanga back, but then you went out and got Tro Harris from Virginia, who had 847 yards last year and 59 catches. Really good football player. Fits that system extremely well. And you got Parker Livingston, who as a true freshman last year had 29 catches for 516 yards and 6 touchdowns in your league before being run out of town. I'm quite confident that Parker Livingston's going to have a big game against Texas this year in the Red River Shootout. I'm pretty confident in that. Then you got Hayden Hansen comes back, who's a blocking tight end and can move the needles. But then they got a kid from Colorado State named Rocky Beers, who had 31 catches and 7 touchdowns last year. So there's a lot of weapons that they're going to have this year. The only concern is they're a little thin amongst at the receiving core. They've had some injuries at receiver in recent years. They can't afford to have similar problems this year because they are thin. But if they can stay mostly healthy, their offense is good. Agree with you. Guys, they started 2 true freshmen on the offensive line last year. 2 very talented true freshmen. And Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foji as my best chance again. And I like the Marion Harris pickup from Arkansas too. It's a solid pickup. But the big thing for Oklahoma is I think they have one of the best secondaries in the country. Getting Owen Heineke back was big for them. Him and Kip Lewis, really dynamic 1-2 punch at linebacker. And I think their D-line, although they lost some dudes, is going to be really good this year. And they're a lot like Notre Dame. I don't know if there's like even Taylor Ween and David Stone, who get a lot of hype. They're really good players, but are they like Dylan Stewart? Are they Colin Simmons? No, they're not. They're a lot like Notre Dame in that they just throw waves of really good players at you and athletic players at you. And Brent Venables is one of the best defensive play callers in the business. There's a reason the Clemson defense hasn't looked the same ever since he left, and they won 2 titles while he was there.
Very true.
So I like this Sooner team, and now here's the rub: their schedule is rough. They play at Georgia, at Michigan in the non-conference. They play at Mississippi State, at Florida, at Missouri. Their home schedule's tough. They have Texas at home. They have South Carolina at home, Ole Miss at home, A&M at home. But I think a lot of those games, I think home game wise, I think they handle their business. I have them losing to Georgia in the non-conference, on the road, and then I have them. I'm with you. I have them beating Texas in the Red River or in the shootout. But I feel like they're a team that's they're going to drop a game to somebody that they shouldn't, and that's why I have them different.
Yeah, I have them losing to Ole Miss in a game that they shouldn't lose to, but I also have that loss to Georgia. That's where I'm at. Yeah. Like I have all 3 of the teams that I have up top, I have them losing a game that they shouldn't lose to. I have Georgia losing to South Carolina on the road at the end of the year. I have Oklahoma losing to Ole Miss at the end of the year, and I have Texas losing at Missouri in November.
So let's talk about Texas first, because I also have Georgia losing only 1 game this year, and it's not to somebody good. So that's interesting. Well, not somebody that's considered a top team. Let's talk about Texas. I've been back and forth on this one a lot, Trev, because I think there's a world in which Texas disappoints this year. I'm not sure how I feel about Will Muschamp as a coach. I don't know that Steve Sarkisian has learned anything from his mistakes last year as a coach, because he doesn't actually admit to those mistakes. He went out in the portal and got some guys last year, and we thought, boy, he learned from his mistakes in 2024. Look at all the guys he got out of the portal on the D-line. He clearly understands they got to be on the D-line, and then boom, same thing. Because they're just a soft team. It's kind of like Lincoln Riley. They're not soft because of the players. They're soft because of the head coach. And I got a lot of concerns about Texas. But at the end of the day, I also look at it and I say, this is the best roster in the league. It just is. Are they the deepest roster? No, I don't. But they're the best roster in the league. And so I have them. It's hard for me to not have them just win some games on talent alone. I mean, they went 9-3 last year in the regular season, only lost 2 games in their league last year. Their schedule this year is a little bit tougher, I would argue. It's a little bit tougher this year, but I just think Texas, I have their talent winning the day. But I would not be at all shocked if this happens. I'm sorry, follow me here. Let's say they beat the Buckeyes. If they lose to Tennessee and Oklahoma in back-to-back games, which could happen, that team falls apart and they lose at least 1 more game, if not 2. They've got to come out that 2-game slate and there's a bye in between. They've got to win at least 1 of those games. If they win 1 of those games, assuming they beat Ohio State, but let's be real, Trev, there is a unlikely but legitimate possibility that Texas starts the season 2-3. I won't be shocked if Ohio State goes down to Austin and beats them. I won't be shocked if Tennessee upsets them in Knoxville, and I won't be shocked if Oklahoma beats them in the Red River Shootout. Then what happens to them? They still have road games against LSU and Texas A&M coming up. But at the end of the day, I just think the talent wins the day. I think they beat Ohio State. I think they win one of those two games, and I just think they end up getting rolling and finish the year, and they just out-talent people.
Yeah, we have very similar concerns about Texas. What I'm banking on per my prediction, so just a window in, and this is how I predicted Texas' season to go. I do have them beating Ohio State and Tennessee both early in the year. For Ohio State, it's partially the travel, it's the moving pieces of the new offensive coordinator, and I love Texas's roster. Not to say that I don't love Ohio State's roster, but I love Texas's roster. And then with Tennessee, I think they benefit of getting them early in the season because by the time they hit that home stretch and Tennessee hits the home stretch, I think that they're going to be a team that no team in the SEC wants to face down the home stretch. I really believe that. Sure. That's why I have them at 4th. With Texas, what I am banking on, because I am predicting them to lose in the first Saturday of November on the road at Missouri, I am banking on the fact that they respond well and beat LSU on the road, Arkansas at home, and Texas A&M at the end of the season. Where it concerns me with their soft-minded head coach is the fact that they could start feeling bad for themselves and doing the woe is us, like, well, that's not fair because we've already had to play Ohio State, we've already had to play Tennessee, we've already done the Red River Shootout, we've already had to play Ole Miss, who was in the playoffs last year. If they don't respond well to that upset that I'm predicting on the road against Missouri, the wheels could fall off, and Texas could be looking at back-to-back seasons not making the college football playoff. However, if they are able to respond well to that loss and go on the road to LSU and go on the road and beat Texas A&M at the end of the year, then I think that answers some of the questions about Sark and Texas and what their intestinal fortitude is as a team. But that's kind of what I'm banking on to keep them in my top 4.
I dig it. I love your point though, Trev. We're on the same page. If he starts kind of with the crybaby stuff, why would the SEC give us this? Blah, 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 blah. This is why we're, I could see that team quitting. And we have evidence that he's going to be that way because he's been crying the whole offseason. Mm-hmm. And whining the whole offseason because his 3-loss team didn't make the playoff last year. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about the Bulldogs. I'll just come out and say it. This is going to be Georgia's best team since their title team. I don't think that they're as good as their title team at all, but I think this is going to be their best team. I think this is going to be better than the 2023 team, which I said at the time I thought was a little bit overrated. I just look at this team, Trev, and there's some question marks, but at the end of the day, I just don't see like a major weakness on this team.
Sure.
And they've dominated the SEC the last 2 years, even though they weren't as good as that they've been in the past. And we called them taking a step back the last 2 years. They did take a step back the last 2 years. Anyone being objective has to look at that and say they weren't nearly as good as they have been in the past. But they still won the SEC both times. Because the one thing Kirby Smart knows how to do is win in the SEC. Hasn't figured out how to win in the postseason in an expanded playoff, but he certainly knows how to win in the SEC. And I think this team is more talented and deeper than his last 2 teams. So I think they're the class of the league, and their schedule's not as challenging as it's been. It's a good schedule, but it's not like the 24 season. But even the 24 season, what'd they go, 10-2? With a team not as good as this one and a brutal schedule that year? I just think Georgia's the class of the league. I could see them running the table. I have them getting upset. I have them having a Clemson 2016 moment. That was my loss. I have them having we've kind of run the table in the league and we're handling our business and, we're cruising. We're going to be the number 1 seed. And I have them late in the year, Trev, actually looking at their schedule. Who was it? I'm trying to find. Where did I have them losing? I had them losing to Florida in their rivalry matchup. That's what I have them getting beat by. I have them coming off wins over Bama on the road, over Auburn. They get a bye. They're feeling really good about themselves. They might be the number 1 team in the country. They've beat Oklahoma already. They've beat Auburn. They've beat Alabama. Feeling really. And they got Ole Miss coming up the next week, and they're wanting payback against the Rebels for beating them in the playoff the year before. And I think they beat Ole Miss in Oxford, by the way. But I have them overlooking Florida, who's played them tough to a degree the last couple years. And that's Florida having one of their big upsets. So I have if I'm wrong and Georgia doesn't lose that game, I think they go undefeated. I think they're going to smack Ole Miss this year in Oxford.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. I don't think that's going to be a close game either. I have Georgia at the top of the league. They're the class of the league. I'm with you. I have very little questions about Kirby being able to run through that league. The bigger question is out of conference, which led me to, again, this is more of a projection type of prediction. But that's why I've also have Georgia losing to somebody that they shouldn't. But I have that team being South Carolina because I think that they have the offensive firepower to hurt Georgia's defense if they overlook them. I could see there's a world where Georgia starts really looking ahead to Georgia Tech. Now, not because Georgia Tech's going to be ranked or they're going to be this gauntlet coming out of the ACC. There's been a lot of talk about Georgia's inability to perform out of conference. It's also a rivalry game. I could see them overlooking on the road in a tough environment in South Carolina. And I think with guys like Nick Harbor, with a quarterback that's able to make plays like Lenore Sellers, I could see that being a thing. So I have them dropping a game that they shouldn't as well, but I still have Georgia being the class of the league. That's where I'm at.
Let's talk SEC title game, Mr. Trowbridge. Got the Bulldogs going against the Sooners. Talk to me about it.
I do. Now I have Georgia winning this one. It feels somewhat of like a lazy take on my part, but until somebody dethrones Georgia in the SEC, it's very hard for me to predict somebody else to beat them. There's teams that have the opportunity to. Don't get me wrong. Any one of these top 5 teams, if they meet Georgia in the SEC top, Tennessee has the talent to beat Georgia. Texas certainly has the talent to beat Georgia. Alabama absolutely has the talent to beat Georgia. But that's kind of Kirby's home thing. Like that Georgia in the SEC championship, especially as of late, has been his wheelhouse. That's his bag. So I have Georgia beating Oklahoma, but I still have Oklahoma making the playoffs as a 3-loss team. I have them going 10-3, being on the road in the college football playoffs.
I have the Bulldogs playing Texas, and I have them beating Texas in the SEC title game for the same reason that they beat Texas every other time, because they will whip them in the trenches. It's a big, physical Georgia offensive line that's more experienced than it's been the last couple of years. And their running backs are very good. They've got Georgia caliber receivers, meaning like maybe they're not studs, but they just make plays. I think the Isaiah Canyon pickup was a really good one, giving them kind of that vertical threat. Lawson Lucky will still be making plays at tight end. I just think Georgia just is, they're a team with fewer weaknesses. Doesn't mean they're like elite everywhere. It just means they just have fewer holes.
Yeah.
And I think this is also going to be their big part of the reason I think this is going to be their best team since 2022 is because I think this is their best back 7 since 2022. Now, the big concern I have for them is their D-line. But I'll talk more about why I think that's going to be better when we get to our player superlatives. But I just think Georgia's the class of the league. I could see any of the top 3 teams winning it all. And I could see Texas just finally putting it all together. Look, if Texas puts it all together, I think they can win the SEC, no question.
Sure.
But it's just what's my confidence level that they actually put it all together. That's more of the issue I have.
Yeah, sometimes you have to look at who's driving the ship. I'm with you completely.
That's right.
Well, let's talk about some of those SEC superlatives here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're going to do just like what we did with the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, and dive into some of these superlatives. I kicked us off last time, Brian. I'll toss it over to you. Who do you have out of the SEC as your top offensive player of the year?
So these first 2 picks are going to be why I decided not to have Texas have all those potential upsets that we talked about. And it's because at the end of the day, I think Arch is going to be the player that people thought he would be coming out. I think he's going to be a playmaker. He's a leader. He's going to make plays with his arm. He's going to make plays with his legs. He's also, as I've said, he's more like his Uncle Eli than he is his Uncle Peyton. And I think that's where some of the criticism comes. They'll look at how could he make that read? How could he miss that guy? That was Eli, his whole career. And then what was his record in the postseason against Tom Brady? 2-0, because he was going to make the play. It wasn't always pretty, but he was going to do what he needed to do to win those big games. And then to play Tom Brady in Super Bowl, you had to beat some good teams in the NFC to get there, and that's just kind of how Eli was. I think Arch is a lot like Eli as a player. It's not always sexy, but it gets the job done. And when it is pretty, you're not stopping him. You're not stopping that team. And he can run. So weapons around him, best O-line he's had. I don't think it's going to be an elite O-line, but it's going to be better than what it's been the last couple of years. So I think Arch is going to end up being the best player in the league. It's the dual threat ability to me that's going to help him out. And if you come down to him and Trinidad Chambliss, I have a lot more faith that Arch's offensive line is going to keep him vertical than I do Trinidad's offensive line, keeping him vertical.
I also have Arch Manning as my top offensive player in the league for all the reasons that you listed out. Won't hamper on it, but I think he's going to have a really good season this year. So my pick is also Arch Manning.
Love it. Love it.
Who's your pick on defense?
Colin Simmons, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, with at the end of the day, I don't trust Sark. I've got questions about this. I got questions about but they have the two best players in the league, arguably. They've got truly elite talent that can kind of overcome some of the coaching stuff. That may not have been the best game plan, or, that might have been they didn't practice great and Sark's this and Sark's that. But at the end of the day, who can cover Cam Coleman and Emmett Mosley and Ryan Wingo? And, you know what I mean? And then stop Arch, who's running the ball, and who's going to block. Yeah, you may say whatever you want. Will Muschamp's scheme is this, and this. But who's going to block Colin Simmons? So that's really where a lot of it comes from for me. Texas has just got too much talent to me to disappoint. And if they do disappoint, they've got the guy leading that program. But I think at the end of the day, Stark's not a bad coach. Let's not also forget he's soft, in my opinion, but he's also had his team in the semifinals 2 of the last 3 years. So there's some things to be said, but I just think at the end of the day, the talent of Texas is just too good. Who do you have, Trev?
I'm Xavier Atkins, linebacker at Auburn. If Auburn's going to have the type of season I think they can have, they go 8-4, they upset Alabama in the Iron Bowl. I think they're going to need their guy at the center of that defense to hold it all together. And I think Xavier Atkins is in for a great season. And he also comes back along with DJ Durkin. I thought it was a great move by Alex Golesh to bring back their defensive coordinator. I'm going to talk about Colin Simmons later, believe me, but my pick overall is Xavier Atkins.
I dig that. Let's talk breakout player on offense, Trev. Who's your breakout player?
I'm going with Keelan Russell in Alabama. They just named him the starter. I think that, again, I know that Kalen DeBoer is not listening to Irish Breakdown and taking what we say into consideration. But I do believe that I agree, run the ball. But I am happy for the Crimson Tide that they went with Keelan Russell. He's the higher ceiling player, and with those weapons coming back, I mean, obviously you have Ryan Williams, you have Latsier Brooks. I think he's going to put up numbers, and he's going to put people on notice this year. I have no doubt that any Alabama quarterback isn't going to produce. I mean, heck, Ty Simpson produced enough for him to be a first-round NFL draft pick. We can get into whether or not we agree with that, but I think Keelan Russell's a better quarterback than Ty Simpson, and this is a very, very, very friendly system for quarterback to put up numbers. So I got Keelan Russell.
Agree. That was my pick as well, for every reason that you mentioned. Let's go top newcomer Trev. Breakout player on defense.
I have cornerback Cortland Guillory from Oklahoma. If Oklahoma is going to have the season that I expect them to have, they need somebody to step up in that secondary along with the Bowen brothers. And I thought they both played well last year. But Cortland Guillory, I firmly believe, is in that next wave of cornerbacks that are getting ready to step up. The Devin Sanchez's of the world, the Ifeoma Degwus and the Brandon Finneys of the world, the Ellis Robinsons of the world of Georgia. I think that's what Cortland Guillory brings, and that's the type of presence he brings to Oklahoma's secondary. So that's who I'm going with. Top breakout.
Love it. My top breakout is, my big question about Georgia is, can their D-line be more effective than it was last year? I think that was their Achilles heel. I think Elijah Griffin is the reason that they have that breakout this year. I think he's an absolute elite talent, but he was young last year, and I think they were kind of, in some ways, Georgia was trying to find their way. Even as a true freshman, though, still 22 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and he's a guy that I see having a really big breakout season for them. Maybe could he be the next Jordan Davis at Georgia? I'll tell you what, he's got a chance to be. He's got the talent to be. I don't think there's any question about that, Trev. So I think Elijah Griffin is my breakout player, and him being my breakout player is a big reason why I'm as high on Georgia as I am this year, because I think he gives them something that they lacked. Last year, Trev, he had 14 pressures. It was the most amongst their interior linemen, returning interior linemen, because Christian Miller's gone. But I just think this year in year 2, I just think he makes that big jump. I do. Christian Miller had more pressures, but Christian Miller had combined 2 hits plus sacks in the quarterback on 244 pass rush attempts. Elijah Griffin on 219 pass rush attempts only had 14 pressures. But he had 5 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. I think that number takes a big jump in year 2. And it's his breakout that allows the defensive line as a whole to play better, which then allows their talented linebackers and talented safeties to then go play ball. And that's why I think Georgia is going to be the class of the SEC list this year. So that pick is partly why I'm so much like, okay, this is the one team in the SEC that has a shot to go win it all this year. That's where I'm at. And again, I'm not someone who rides the Georgia bandwagon. I've said the last 2 years they're going to be down, and they were. That's why they're 0 in the postseason. But this team is built a little bit different, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I like it a lot. Brian, let's talk about the top newcomer on offense. Friendly reminder, newcomer is either talking about a player that is transferred from outside of the league or a true freshman. And I'll just rip the Band-Aid off now. I cheated, and I went with 2 on offense as top newcomers.
It's okay. I got my top skill player on defense. I have 2 guys, so you're allowed to do that.
Okay, bang. There we go. Got permission from the boss, and we're ripping through it.
You were going to ask permission. You were going to ask for forgiveness. So I like that about you.
Well, that's kind of my MO. You kind of ask for forgiveness, but here we are. Here we are. My first top newcomer on offense is Faison Brandon. That's one of the reasons why I was confident in putting Tennessee in my top 4. It's why I'm going to have Tennessee in my college football playoff sneak preview for Friday's show. But I was very curious to see what route Tennessee was going to go, what Josh Heupel was going to do at the quarterback position. So I have Faison Brandon as the first one. And you guys know where I'm going with my second one. It's Byron Brown, the quarterback at Auburn. I'm really hitching my wagon to Auburn here, man. And so that's where I'm at. I am very high on what he's going to be able to do. Not a lot of people. He's not a household name yet. Dude's going to make plays this year. That's where I'm at.
If you remember yesterday, I went with a transfer and a freshman.
Yeah.
I also went with a transfer and freshman on this one.
Okay.
And it's Byron Brown and Faison Brandon. We have the same exact one. Yeah, I think Byron Brown is the transfer breakout. I think he's a top newcomer from a transfer standpoint. And there's a lot of options here for transfers. And he's one of the ones that came from outside the league. But a lot of the skill players came, Sam Levitt came from outside the league. If he's as good as people think he is, he's a guy that could be in this conversation. I'm not there yet. But those 2 for me. I'm with you. I'm right there with you, Trev. Who was your top newcomer on defense? Again, high school kid or transfer from outside the league?
I'm going back to the Vols, man, and I'm going with TJ Metcalf, the safety that came over from Michigan. I think he's going to be one of the players that can help shore up the back end of the Tennessee defense, and he's one of the players coming in that I think is going to help with that turnaround that you were talking about, being a little bit higher on Tennessee's defense than what some other people are. I think that's going to be a big piece for them. So I have TJ Metcalf, the safety that transferred in from Michigan, who is now at Tennessee.
So I went transfer and freshman on this one as well. My transfer is Rasheem Biles, the linebacker from Texas, kid that we're very familiar with, had a pick 6 against Notre Dame last year. I think he was a tackling machine at Pitt. I think he's going to be very similar to that at Texas. I think he's going to be an impact player for them, especially with Ty Anthony Smith being kicked off the team here recently. They're going to need him to be that way. And then my freshman is Deuce Gerald's, defensive lineman from LSU. He's going to start as a true freshman at LSU, and they're going to ask him to do a lot in that defense. And from what I've read, he's had a good fall camp. So Deuce Gerald's is my freshman. Rasheem Biles is my transfer.
I like that. I like that a lot. Let's dive into top. I believe we're at top linemen now. We'll start on offense. Top offensive lineman, top defensive lineman.
QB.
Brian, who do you have as your top offensive lineman?
This might surprise some people. All the buzz is on Trevor Gooseby and how good Trevor Gooseby is going to be, and I think he's talented, and I think he'll do fine. But he's injured, and he's going to be kind of dealing with the lower body injury this year. But I'll tell you, one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the country, in my opinion, is the left tackle at Missouri, Caden Green. You look at his numbers last year; he was a better pass blocker last year than what Trevor Gooseby was, and I think he's a very physical run blocker. So there's other guys that you could go with here. There's some good offensive linemen in the league, but I really like Caden Green from Missouri. He's my top offensive lineman in the league. I might have gone with him anyway. I didn't put this list together till after the Trevor Gooseby injury, so I can't say for certain I'd have gone with him anyway. But the Gooseby injury, meaning he's going to be missing a few weeks of camp, and I always get nervous about lower body injuries in season with offensive linemen, just kind of maybe missing a step. And when you're missing a step, he's still really good. But when you're talking about 2 really, really good players, that can be enough to be that jump. And then another guy I got my eye on is Jordan Seaton, is a guy that I thought about who's got all the talent in the world, who wasn't coach worth a darn at Colorado. Does him receiving actual coaching, does it cause him to step up and become the best offensive lineman in the conference? I thought about him as well. Also thought about him for the top newcomer. But at the end of the day, I know Caden Green is really good in the SEC, and that's why I ultimately went with him.
For me on offense, I definitely went with a projection here. Did not have to project in the slightest for my defensive pick. Offense, I projected. Georgia moved I'm going to get his name wrong. Ernest Green back to left tackle. I'm projecting him to be the top offensive lineman in the league because if Georgia's going to be the number one team and win the SEC again, that side of the offensive line has to be shored up. I think Gunnar Stockton gets overlooked by some people. I think that this is a better receiving core that Georgia's going to have. That can get nullified if you have a lot of holes at left tackle. They tried it earlier in his career and it didn't pan out. Does the experience that he now has starting aid him in his transition back to left tackle? I'm projecting that it does, so I'm going with Ernest Green because of the level of impact that he's going to have on Georgia's offense.
I dig that. It's kind of how you're going there, like where I go with my breakout on defense, Elijah Griffin. So for Georgia, completely agree. I like that pick. Who's your top lineman, Trev? You said it's an easy one. No projection there. Who was your top lineman?
Colin Simmons.
Okay. Because you didn't have him. That's right. You didn't have him as your top defensive player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Colin Simmons at Texas for all the reasons that you listed off why he was your top defensive player.
He's a dog.
Yeah.
He's an absolute dog. My top lineman on defense, because Colin Simmons isn't eligible for me, and there's some good options here, but I'm going Dylan Stewart from South Carolina. I think he's going to be an impact player for the Gamecocks this year. His team won't be great, but he'll be great. And he is dealing with a little bit of a minor thing. He may not play in the opener, but I think he'll end up being fine, and he's going to be a heck of a player. Let's talk about your top skill player on offense, Trevor. What say you? Top skill player. Can be quarterback. It can be any running back, wide receiver, or tight end in the league, and it just can't be someone you've used so far.
I'm going with Cam Coleman from Texas. He changes the landscape of that Texas receiving core for me. I think Ryan Wingo's a good player, but I think he's going to be strongly aided by Cam Coleman's presence in Austin. He's a player that now has experience coming in from the SEC. He was at Auburn, and I'm confident in saying this. Cam Coleman was a good player last year. Some things he has to shore up with consistency, but I know he's going to be more productive, and he's going to have better quarterback play going to Arch Manning from Ashton Daniels. I'm very confident in saying that. So not too much insight there. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to put those 2 and 2 together, but I'm going with Cam Coleman.
There's a lot of good options here, Trev. We could go Jaden Ball, the running back from Florida. We could go Kawan Lacey, the running back from Ole Miss. That might be an easy one to pick. A lot of preseason first-team All-America predictions, but I'm very nervous about him being able to repeat that with the offensive line that they have at Ole Miss. It's not because he's not a heck of a player. It's because I worry about the guys making holes for him.
Sure.
But for all those reasons, I'm with you. I'm going Cam Coleman. I can't if I'm going to have Arch as my top player, then someone's going to benefit from that, and he's an elite talent, and I have him there. I could also see Ryan Williams having a bounce back year as well for Bama. Yeah. Yep.
I'm with that.
Yep. Somebody said Ahmed Hart if he wasn't dealing with the shooting.
Yes.
Again, certainly he's in the conversation, but he is, and that's why I'm going Cam Coleman. Who's your top skill player on defense? I actually have 2. This could be any DB or linebacker.
I'm going with KJ Bolden from Georgia. I think he's one of the reasons why I firmly believe Georgia's defense is due for a turnaround. You and I both love the makeup of their secondary. I think KJ Bolden is one of the best safeties in the country. I believe that the best duo in the country lives in South Bend, and that's Breonte Johnson and Adon Schuler. But KJ Bolden, I think, is probably, I would crown him the best safety in the country right now, but I think that conversation starts to get a little bit closer.
Without a doubt, he's in the conversation. No doubt. He was one of my 2. He was my DB, and my other guys. I have Xavier Atkins, linebacker from Auburn, who you talked about earlier. Absolute tackling machine, playmaker. And he's not adjusting. Even though he's got a new head coach, he's not adjusting to a new defense because, as you said, it was a very smart move to bring DJ Durkin back and to keep him rolling. So he is absolutely my top skill player on defense. So Trev, my dude, we're now wrapping it up here. Who is your coach of the year in the SEC?
Coach of the year for me in the SEC is Brett Venables. If Oklahoma does what I think they do this year, play for the SEC championship, make it back to the playoffs, I think he becomes that choice. The biggest thing for him is he has to break this trend of either going 10-2 in the regular season or 6-7.
Literally.
Yeah,
Literally,
6-6 in
they're
regular
they're
season.
six
It's
and six
weird.
regular season, 10-2 in the regular season. It's been one or the other, which is
Yeah,
where
it's
Lane Kiffin was going into the 2024 season. He had
yep,
been kind of doing the same thing.
yep. So if Brent Venables has a season that I think that he's going to do and going to have, I have him winning the SEC Coach of the Year.
I dig that. I'm going Kirby Smart because I think he hasn't won it in a bit, and I think the job he's going to do this year, getting some of these breakouts, and I think they're just going to dominate the league. So I'm going Kirby Smart.
Sure.
Yeah, it's my pick. I like the Brent Venables pick, but like they were a playoff team last year. If they're 10-2 again, like is that really? I just think when you watch Georgia this year, we're going to be like, dude, that's the class of the league.
Sure.
That's where I'm at.
It's totally fair. Who's your top quarterback of the league?
My top quarterback's Trinidad Chambliss because I have Arch as my player of the year. He's my top quarterback. I think he'll put up numbers. I think he's not going to be as good as he was last year, but it's not because they've got answers for him. It's because he's offensive line. That's my issue. Now, if the offensive line's even worse than I think it could be, then we could have a conversation. Is it Gunnar Stockton? Is he that guy? There's some other quarterbacks in the conversation. We've already used Byron Brown. We've already used Arch Manning. At least I've already used Arch Manning. But that could be, you could see somebody else popping in, but assuming the offensive line is just okay, I think Trinidad's my top quarterback in the league. What say you?
Trinidad's also my top pick for the league. It's kind of the same way that I viewed Devin Dampierre at Utah. The common theme for me is I went with Devin Dampierre at Utah. I went with Damon Williams at Washington. I'm also going with Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss because I think that they're going to be the heart and soul of those teams. I view them very similarly to Jimmy Clausen in 2009, what he meant to Notre Dame's team. I think Trinidad could have a season where, he's already projected to be one of the Heisman finalists by FanDuel, and I could see him having like a Jaden Daniels type of season where the team overall isn't that good, but he's just putting up video game numbers because he has to be that type of player. So that's going to be the whole thing with him. But I'm with you on Trinidad. Brian, to take us home today here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We have a daily mailbag to take us the rest of the way. If this does happen to be your first mailbag, you can put MB for mailbag, mailbox emoji. Lets us know to set that question aside. Super chats get bumped up to the top. We prefer questions on the topics we talked about today. So Notre Dame's outlook versus the Big Ten and the SEC. And then we previewed, obviously, both conferences. So any of those questions are fair game.
I love this one. Tommy Guns asked us this question yesterday, Trev, about the Big 12 and the ACC, and I want to talk about it again here in this show as well.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, out of the Big Ten, I'd probably say upset. I mean, Maryland's got to be on that list for me. I think their defense is underrated, and I love Malik Washington at quarterback. Maryland is probably, if I could only pick one, that'd be the team that I keep my eye out on.
I've got a couple. I like Maryland's one. I think Rutgers is going to have a big upset this year. I mentioned that earlier. I think they're with KJ Duff, Dylan Lonergan. They've got some veterans coming back up front. Schiano just seems to find a way for that team to be better than you think. I think that another team is Washington. I think Washington's got some home games this year where they could end up doing some damage to one of the top teams in the league. And I have that happening. I have them upsetting Indiana and kind of throwing a big wrinkle. I mean, they're going to pave the way for Oregon, who they're going to then lose to the next week. But I think they're another team that, they got Penn State at home. They've got Indiana at home. They're going to be a team that could pull off some upsets, in my opinion. I have them at USC. That's going to be an interesting game because it's a West Coast game. It's not how's USC going to handle Damon Williams? That's another one for me. Let's talk SEC, Trev, because we talked about one earlier. Mississippi State's going to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat because of Kamarian Taylor.
Oh yeah, I think the SEC is chock full of them, man. I'm with you on Mississippi State. Florida's one of those teams for me, especially down the home stretch. If they're able to stay healthy, I think they have a very underrated group of skilled players, wide receivers, running back with Jaden Ball, obviously all tied in. They're one of those teams for me. A part of me just with Jared Curtis, I believe, or actually. Who did Vanderbilt name as their starter? It wasn't Jared Curtis, was it? Or was it?
I haven't seen them. I haven't seen that they've named the starter yet.
Okay.
My understanding was that they were likely going to start a veteran early and then break Jared in. was
Yeah.
my
Okay.
understanding. But I haven't seen
But
that. That was my understanding going into camp.
sure.
But
I,
I haven't seen that they've named a starter.
I would throw Vanderbilt in that conversation
Yep.
strictly from how well coached that they are. I mean, I'm never going to
Mhm.
count out Clark Lee. I know what we know now about the 25 season, but going into 24, I would not have predicted Clark Lee upsets that Alabama team.
Yep.
So just with how disciplined they are, the culture that they have there, I would put Vanderbilt's name in that hat as well.
I'm gonna throw Missouri and Auburn, my 10 and
Mm,
11 teams in the league. They're going to be, they have a shot to beat somebody as well. And I think Florida has the big upset. I have them as the only team that beats Georgia in the regular season. As I said, it's my Clemson Pitt versus Pitt 2016 moment is what it is, Trev. Where the team that wins it all just has that. Wait a minute, what was it? Was it 17 when Saban, they were 11-0 and lost to Auburn, who wasn't even
yeah.
that good that year? It's like that kind of game where you're like, wait a minute, what? You beat that team, that team, that team, that team, and beat that team by 17 in the big SEC title game, but that team beat you? You know what I mean? Like, I could see something like that. So Florida's another team that I have in that conversation. And then part of the reason I have Tennessee fifth is because I think they're going to pull off a couple of upsets this year, including beating Texas.
I like that.
So that's partly why I have them where I have them. So it's a good
Cool.
one, Tommy. I like that. It's a good way to kick off the show.
From Irish Dragon, since we know most of the Big Ten doesn't believe in Power Four out of conference games, hypothetically, who would have more wins in cross league matchups between the Big Ten and the SEC? Format of number one versus number one, number two versus number two, etc.
I think the Big Ten would do well at the top. I'll just look at my 1, 2, and 3. My number one Georgia versus number one Ohio State. That'd be a great game. I could see the Big Ten winning that. My number 2 Texas going against number 2 Oregon. I'd probably take Texas in that game, and then number 3 Oklahoma against number 3 Indiana. I'd probably take Indiana in that game. So I'd give one I feel good goes to the SEC, one I feel good goes to the Big Ten, and then the third one's a toss-up. I'd probably lean towards Ohio State because they've just been better in recent years, but I could see Georgia winning that game. But after that, Trev, it gets like 4 Bama against 4 Minnesota. You know what I mean? Like it's 5 Tennessee against who's my 5 in the Big Ten? Let me pull up my email to you that has my rankings. But so like I get let's see here, 4 Bama against 4 Minnesota, 5 Tennessee against 5 Michigan, 6. Let me see here. I've got 6 Ole Miss against 6 Washington. That one I like for the Big Ten. 7 LSU against 7 Iowa. I like LSU. 8 Florida against 8 USC. That might be one that USC could win, but I like LSU in that one. 9 Texas A&M against 9 Maryland. I like the SEC. 10 Auburn against 10 Penn State. I like Auburn. 11 Missouri against 11 UCLA. I like UCLA. 12 Kentucky against 12 Michigan State. That could be a good game, but I'd probably lean towards Kentucky. 13 Mississippi State against 13 Rutgers. Probably lean towards Mississippi State on that one. 14 Vanderbilt against 14 Northwestern. Vandy. 15 South Carolina against 15 Illinois. 16 Arkansas against 16 Wisconsin. I'd probably lean towards Arkansas. But I think Wisconsin would have a shot. The issue I had with Wisconsin, and I didn't talk about it earlier, they're having some major O-line injury woes, which is why I'm not as high on the Badgers right now as I was a month ago. Because a couple of their starting linemen are out, and it doesn't look good. Like, even if they come back, they're going to 320-pounders with lower body injuries makes me nervous. Having your starting tackle being a walking boot for 2 months or for like 2-3 weeks of fall camp is, and he doesn't have much experience to begin with, is not a good sign for him to have a big jump in the starting lineup. So that's why I'm a little bit more down on Wisconsin than I have been in the past. What say you, Trev?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very competitive up top, which goes to show what we've talked about. I think the Big Ten's very top heavy. We think that 3 of the teams that they have in the top half of the league is amongst the best in the country. Where the true separation lies is between teams, honestly, 4 through 18. There's a world where, I don't know if I'd be willing to predict it, but there's a world that the SEC clean sweeps in the bottom half of the league. Just because I think it's different. Bottom half of the Big Ten, we're talking about Purdue. The bottom team that I have in the SEC is Arkansas. I think Arkansas beats Purdue. My 15th ranked. Yeah, my 15th ranked team is Mississippi State. The second lowest team that I have in the Big Ten, I believe, was Northwestern. I'm taking Mississippi State over Northwestern
In a beatdown, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's, again, we can get into the nitty gritty of like who matches up best where and who's injured where, and I think all those conversations are fair. But just looking at it for what it is on paper, there's a world where the SEC clean sweeps in the bottom half of the league.
Yep, agree. Good questions. Let's get to let's go down here. Here's one from Archer. He finally gets a chance to ask us an Ohio State question that we'll answer since it's a Big Ten show.
There we go. From Archer, resident Ohio State fan in the chat, make a starting 3 wide receiver group from the most recent OSU wide receivers: Terry McLaurin, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith.
This is incredibly hard. Oh, boy. I'd have Jeremiah Smith as my boundary. Oh, man. I'd probably go Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba would probably be my other two, with all due respect to Cardinal Tate and Emeka Egbuka, and Chris Olave. I'd probably go Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba would be my other two. But there's really no wrong answer here.
Yeah, I'd probably go Jeremiah Smith in my boundary, JSN in my slot. Yeah, no, I'm gonna go Emeka as my field. I think that would be nasty. But to your point, I just don't. There's no combination here. That's incorrect.
No, there's no wrong answer here. I mean, with all due respect to Terry McLaurin, I think that'd probably be the only wrong answer, and that's only because of just how phenomenal the other guys were. Mm-hmm. It's not that he wasn't a really good player, but yeah, it's just that would be mine.
Like it.
Good one, Archer.
From Irish Dragon, Big Ten quarterback lottery. If you could rearrange the quarterbacks of the conference, who would you move where to be a better fit?
Oh, man, I would love Malik Washington and Kyle Whittingham's offense. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be fun to watch. That would be one that I would go with. Yes. That's one that just kind of pops off at me.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think that'd be so fun. I mean, even up in the top of the league, like we've seen what Mike Shanahan can do with Curtis Rourke and Fernando Mendoza. What if you gave him like a Dante Moore, or a Julian Sayin? I think that'd be fun to see. Putting Malik Washington in, putting him in Kyle Whittingham's offense would be a lot of fun. Feel the same way about putting Damon Williams there because he's pretty similar to Devin Dampierre, like similar build. I think that'd be a lot of fun too. God, I mean, there's a lot of good ones.
So this is going to be my last one, Trev. You're going to finish up the mailbag, but I did want to address this before I have to go to the Notre Dame practice today. Biggest cheater slime ball, LSU or Michigan? I'll say this. I think what Lane Kiffin is doing is gross. I think that it's absolutely ridiculous that we're in a world where professional athletes are coming back to college to play sports. But my question is, what rule is Lane Kiffin breaking? A judge ruled that they can bring these players back. Now, would I expect the coach to have the fortitude to say, hey, we're not doing that, man. It's not right. We're not going to go do that. But you know what? Somebody will. And that somebody is Lane Kiffin, which is, like Ryan Day said it, and I was really disappointed because of the lack of leadership that he showed. You look at his answer compared to Kirby Smart's answer, for example, and I'm like, that's a leader, that's not. But he's like, I'm against it, but hey, if people are going to do it, we have to consider it. Like, what kind of nonsense is that? You know what I mean? Marcus Freeman's like, dude, the kid's not going to be able to do it academically if he comes in now. It's just not a process. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of nonsense. But like I report again, Michigan broke a rule. They cheated. If you're going to call LSU a cheater, you have to point me to a rule that he is breaking. Because the court basically said the rule that the NCAA has is void. I think that's stupid. I think it's social. It's like, to me, it's nothing more. These decisions are nothing more than that's the phrase I'm looking for here, Trev. It's like you're voting against the law to go with something that's tugging on your heartstrings. It's about fairness. And then the nonsense, they should have just gave a blanket rule. Why? Rules change all the time. And so they made a rule for 5 for 5 after all these guys had gone. So, life's hard sometimes. There's consequences to things sometimes. That's life. But you got a blanket on these people who haven't been through winter training with these teams, spring football with these teams, summer workouts with these teams. Like, that's what we're doing here. But again, as much as I think Lane Kiffin's a scumbag, number one, I'm not surprised he's doing this. But again, number two, what rule is he breaking? We know that Connor Stallions broke a very clear rule. It's not just an unwritten rule. It's literally a rule. You can't do this. Lane Kiffin might be doing something that we all find appalling, but again, he's following the law. I don't like it. I wish he had more leadership, but it's Lane Kiffin we're talking about. He's got one job and one job only. It's the SEC. You've got one job, win football games. That's it. Now, again, I don't like it. I would never be that way. It's why I would never, want my son to go play in an SEC school if I had a son who was really good at football. Because I would want my son to understand there's a lot more to life than just winning football games. And I don't think you're going to learn that in the SEC. But he wasn't hired to be a moral leader of the institution, because everybody in the business knows the moral fiber that Lane Kiffin has, and it ain't much. They all know that. If I know it, everyone in the SEC knows it. But they don't care. Why? Because his job is to do one thing and one thing only, and that is win. So Michigan wins both of these because what they did was actually against the rules. And this isn't even the worst thing that Lane Kiffin has done this offseason. The Damon Williams thing is way worse than this. So, that makes him a slime ball cheater. That was cheating, but, this wasn't even cheating. And I'm responding to the thing that we're talking about, which is, what can and what should the SEC do to punish Kiffin and LSU? Nothing. They shouldn't do anything to punish LSU. What they should do is do what the Big Ten did, do what the ACC is about to do, which is make a rule saying this isn't allowed, and then make those players ineligible, and then have those players have to sue and get an injunction to be eligible to play again. And, we'll see how long that goes. But there's very simple. SEC puts out this, we don't support this, then make a rule like the Big Ten did. I don't support the Big Ten on pretty much anything. They made a rule, said this ain't allowed. Can't do it. SEC's kind of taking a different road. They're gonna do the moral, this is terrible, but then not actually do anything to stop LSU. And until they do it, it's just words. And your actions speak a lot louder than your words, because at the end of the day, the SEC wants to win more than they care about developing young people or anything like that. So good on the Big Ten.
No disagreements from my side here, brother. I agree completely.
Yeah. So feel free to add to that. Otherwise, I'll see you later.
Right on. Look, as far as the original question goes, do I think LSU is cheating? No, I do not. Michigan is the only team that I know of for a fact was actually caught cheating in the game. And so that's where I'm at with this one. I agree with all the points that Brian put up. Irish Dragon asked another question. SEC lottery, if you could rearrange the quarterbacks of the conferences, who would you move and where to be a better fit? See, with the SEC, this is an even deeper question, in my opinion, than it was in the Big Ten. I would have loved. I would. It's tough because there's a lot of new faces in the SEC. Whereas the Big Ten, we know a lot about Damon Williams at Washington. We know about Jade Maeva. We know about Julian Sain. We know about Dante Moore. Whereas in the SEC, it's you have John Mateer coming off of an injury. What does he look like there? Is he able to turn it around? Tennessee just named Faison Brandon the starter. He's new. Keelan Russell, he's new. Sam Levitt's new to the league. Byron Brown's new to the league. So there's not really a whole lot that I would change here. Kenny Minchie's new to the league. I do think it'd be cool to, just selfishly, be cool to see Kenny Minchie throwing to guys like Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo and Emmett Mosley and Dalen McCutcheon, players like that. So I think that would be interesting to see, move him around. Not that I don't think he's going to be a bad fit in Will Stein's offense, but I think that's going to be something interesting to track. I would have put Lenore Sellers in any sort of system that develops quarterbacks a little bit better. Now, different conversation perhaps for a different day. I think there needs to be a little bit better quarterback development in the SEC. I think that's one of the reasons why we're higher on the league this year, because we do think that's going to be on the uptick. I would like to see what Kamario Taylor does in a different system. He's the quarterback at Mississippi State. I think that'd be fun to watch. I mean, shoot, you put Kamario Taylor in with, Vanderbilt's system and get to go under Clark Lee. We saw what Clark Lee did with Diego Pavia. Give him somebody talented like Kamario Taylor. I think that'd be really exciting. So I think there's a lot of good options that you could choose from here, but that'd be some of the ones that I'd go to. Outside of some of the obvious ones, I mean, you put a better quarterback like an Arch on one of the worst teams in the SEC, that improves their chances. But who would I rearrange of the quarterbacks in conference to be a better fit? I'd put Kamario Taylor on a better team. I'd put Kenny Minchie on a more established team. Those would be some of my answers there. Got a question in here from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Appreciate you, Salty. Will TCU transfer Josh Hoover, minimize turnovers, and keep the Hoosiers at a championship level, allowing Indiana to pull off the encore? I mean, look, man, to me, that's $1 million question. Josh Hoover's had turnover issues. Some of it, I think, is based on how he plays. He's more of a gunslinger, so he's naturally going to have more interceptions than what I think a Julian Sain is going to have, because I think Julian does an exceptional job of taking care of the football. Josh Hoover needs to be better on the road. That's going to be his number one thing that I think that he has to be able to control this year, especially in a conference like the Big Ten. Josh Hoover last year threw 13 interceptions. 11 of them came on the road. 11 of them came away from home. Against Arizona State on the road, he threw for 242 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. On the road against Kansas State, he only completed 55.3% of his passes and 2 picks. He threw for 376 yards, albeit on 47 attempts, because they lost that game 41-28. That holds true. On the road against BYU, only completed 43.5% of his passes, no touchdowns, 2 picks. In what was a very ugly game on the road against Houston, they ended up winning 17-14, threw 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. It's going to be a big thing that he's going to have to fix. If Indiana wants to repeat and have the encore and they want to have success on the road, Josh Hoover's going to have to figure out a way to not throw interceptions on the road. That's going to be huge for them, especially when you start looking at their schedule and who they have on the road this year. I mean, Indiana is going to be severely helped out because they have 8 true home games this year. They get North Texas at home, Howard at home, Western Kentucky at home, Northwestern at home, Ohio State at home, Minnesota at home, USC at home, and Purdue at home. But if he has turnover issues on the road against Washington, one of the reasons why I have Washington in the upset in that game, and then if you're turning the ball over on the road against Nebraska, that could make things difficult. So that's what I would look at here, Salty, as far as Josh Hoover's concerned, but it'll be close. All righty, let's see here. Got a question in here from Insured by Big, resident LSU fan in the chat. Do you see a 9-3 team making the playoffs this year from the Big Ten or the SEC? If so, who? I don't out of the Big Ten, but that's just because I don't have the teams that I have making the playoff in the Big Ten. I have Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and I don't have Indiana playing in the Big Ten championship game, and I don't have them picking up that third loss. Like I said, I have Ohio State losing in the Big Ten championship game, but I have them going 11-1 in the regular season, so they get in at 11-2. People with 3 or more losses in the Big Ten, I have USC, Washington, Michigan, and Iowa, all at 9-3 or 8-4. They're not making the playoffs. Kind of like what we talked about before, there is a sizable gap, in our opinion, between the top 3 teams in the Big Ten and then everybody else. Everybody else is trying to play catch-up, whereas I think Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon are the class of that league. So nobody out of the Big Ten. The SEC, it's a little bit different. There's a world where they could, I mean, with the difficulty of some of the schedules here, but I have a 3-loss team making it in the SEC, that being Oklahoma, but they don't go 9-3 in the regular season. They go 10-2 in the regular season, and I have them losing to Georgia in the SEC title game to give them that 3rd loss, but I have them being the 4th team in at 10-3. So I don't know if that does your question justice here, Insured. I have a 3-loss team making it from the SEC, but they don't go 9-3 in the regular season. So, but it wouldn't surprise me. If a 9-3 team is going to make the playoffs this year, I think it is going to come from the SEC, unless Ohio State doesn't, I guess I don't want to say live up to the expectation, but if Ohio State doesn't have the season that I project them to have and they go 9-0 in conference, 11-1 in the regular season, if with that schedule, Ohio State goes 9-3, I could see them making the playoffs out of the Big Ten. I mean, look, Ohio State's schedule this year is tough. You get on the road against Texas, you're on the road against Iowa, you're on the road against Indiana, you're on the road against USC, and you're on the road against Nebraska. Your home slate, you still get Illinois, you still get Maryland, a team that Brian and I both predicted to be an upset team, a team that could cause upsets in the Big Ten. You get Oregon at home, and you get Michigan at home. They could have 3 losses and still have 3 really good wins, depending on who they lose to and who they beat. So there is going to be a team out of the Big Ten that gets in with 3 regular season losses. I think that team would be. I think that team would be Ohio State. Got a question in here from ND Wine and Cheese. What will some of the Big Ten versus SEC games have to look like for some of the final nail in the SEC dominance coffin to be driven? Some people still don't think the Big Ten is overtaking the SEC. Well, I mean, I think first, ND Wine and Cheese, we have to grant the premise that the Big Ten has overtaken the SEC. I'm a believer that they have because I think championships are king. But what's interesting about this conversation is for so long, the SEC was like, hey, championships are the only thing that matters. And then since they have stopped winning championships, now it's look at how deep the league is. So I guess the only thing that I would say to you is what do you evaluate? Is it the depth of the league or is it the amount of championships that you win on? Yeah, that you go on to win? Because the last 3 national titles have gone to Big Ten teams. So I think that's where you kind of have to look at with this question. What will some of the Big Ten SEC matchups have to look like? There's not really a ton. I mean, there's Ohio State, Texas at a conference. You have Minnesota, Mississippi State at a conference. I'm scrolling through. You have Michigan, Oklahoma at a conference. Outside of that, you don't have any others besides those 3 teams. You have Ohio State, Texas. You have Minnesota, Mississippi State. You have Michigan, Oklahoma. So, I mean, if either conference gets swept, I mean, that's going to be the big thing. But, yeah, I have Oklahoma winning that game. It's early in Kyle Whittingham's tenure. I've already predicted Texas to beat Ohio State in a game that I think that's close, and Ohio State runs the table the rest of the way. So if that's how you want to evaluate it, but truthfully, especially within expanded playoff, ND Wine and Cheese, I think now it comes down to what you do in the postseason. If the SEC can't, and I don't even think that it's the SEC has to necessarily beat a Big Ten team in the postseason to stake a claim to dominance. They just have to be better in the postseason. Alabama can't lose and have a playoff exit by 35 points. Georgia, the SEC champs the last 2 years, has to pick up a win in the postseason for that to look like. But there's really only 3 Big Ten versus SEC games in the regular season. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think many people are going to put much weight in the Minnesota-Mississippi State game in the conversation of who's the more dominant conference. Comes down to Ohio State, Texas, and Michigan, Oklahoma in the regular season. Got one in here, another one in here from Archer. I'm the Ohio State athletic director and have to hire Ryan Day's replacement after he retires in 5 years. Who do you call first in your coaching search? Oh, gosh. I'm not sure. Archer, you're in the chat. Who would you call? I mean, look. I hate putting this out there because obviously I'm a Notre Dame guy. But you as Ohio State's athletic director would not be doing your due diligence if you didn't try to give Marcus Freeman a phone call based on what he's done in South Bend. Now, I'm going on the record to say I don't think that will happen, and I hope that it doesn't happen for the most obvious reasons. But you would, if I'm the athletic director at Ohio State and I put that hat on for a second, yeah, I'm absolutely calling Marcus Freeman. I'm calling a lot of the top coaches in the country because Ohio State is DK put in a good one. Charlie Weiss Jr., I think that'd be interesting. I'd be curious to see if he would actually leave Nick Saban's side, but I think that'd be an interesting pick too. Time comes to suggest Brian Kelly. As a Notre Dame fan, I wouldn't hate that. But Marcus Freeman would be a person that I would call if I was legitimately Ohio State's athletic director. If I'm giving a 100% honest answer. From Patrick James, is there any plausible scenario that would shake up college football more than Louisville beating Ole Miss and Clemson beating LSU? I mean, is there I mean, sure. I mean, I guess in the spirit of giving a realistic answer, no, that would be pretty chaotic. But yeah, there's certainly more scenarios. That's why I appreciate you putting in plausible scenario. Then this situation, probably not. Then Clemson beating LSU and Louisville beating Ole Miss. I believe I have. Let's see. I think I have Ole Miss beating Louisville. Yep, I have Ole Miss beating Louisville, and then I do have Clemson beating LSU, I think. Yeah, I have Clemson beating LSU in Baton Rouge, so that'll be interesting. Um, but no, I think that would be pretty chaotic in college football for sure. From Battle in the Trenches, where Tennessee didn't beat anyone with a winning record last year, do you see finally beating a quality team this year? Yeah, I do. I predicted Tennessee to finish fourth in the SEC. Look, Tennessee was a very young team last year, and I had concerns about Joey Aguilar coming back. I don't think he performed poorly. I just questioned what his ability was going to be in big games last year, and I don't think he played bad. The defense also didn't help out. I think they're due for a turnaround, but they're a very young team that returns a lot last year, or from last year. I mean, in the bigger games that they played, he threw 2 picks against Georgia. He threw 2 picks on the road against Mississippi State. He turned the ball over twice against Oklahoma. And I mean, in some of the other games that he played in, they lost to Vanderbilt 45-24. I mean, he threw 44 passes, only 1 went for a touchdown. He just didn't perform well enough in the big games to get Tennessee over that hump. But yeah, I think they're due for a turnaround. That'd be me. I think that's where. Tristan asked where Brian went. He's Notre Dame has a fall camp practice, so I'm just wrapping up the mailbag here. We're going to get out of here pretty shortly here, but Notre Dame has a fall camp, or not a fall camp practice, just a practice that he's going to. So you got me to finish up the mailbag, but yes, battle in the trenches. I think Tennessee is going to beat a quality team this year. I have them beating. Let me see. I have them beating Alabama in that rivalry game, 3rd Saturday of October. I also have them beating South Carolina on the road. I have them beating LSU at home. So, yeah, I think they're going to be due to beat a good team this year. From Jay Melvin, one of his potential upset games is Oklahoma going into Athens and beating Georgia. I think they match up well with them. Do you agree or disagree? I absolutely agree that is a potential upset game, for sure. Look, Georgia's a team that can be beaten. There has to be a team in the SEC that I think has to prove that they can dethrone them from being the kings of the SEC, but they're absolutely able to be beaten. I'd keep my eye on that game. It's early. Some of that's going to depend on what John Mateer looks like early in the season. If that offensive line that had 2 true freshmen starting on it last year actually do take the step forward that I project them to have. But, yeah, I don't think that's a crazy upset pick at all. I mean, also, Jay Melvin, you're talking to the guy that's been talking about Auburn beating Alabama in the Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa for the last 5 months. So, no, I agree. I think they match up well, and I could definitely see that as a potential upset. Super chat in here from Charlie Weiss, last belt loop. Appreciate you. Did you see Eli's son? Reminds me of a young Tyler Buckner, especially on the run and throw. Not a diss, just what came to mind. Go Irish. Yeah, appreciate the super chat, Charlie. I have not looked, at Eli Manning's son yet. Something that I would definitely be intrigued to see. I don't know what class he's in. That is definitely more of a Brian question. So, put this up on the message board and see if he's been able to take a look at his film. I just don't want to not do your question justice, but I have not seen that yet, but I believe you. Then super chat from Tyler Ottinger. Appreciate you, Tyler. Why won't DeBoer run the ball? I don't understand how someone gets to that level of coaching and can't put their own ego aside and realize the obvious. Oh, okay. Peyton Manning's son. Okay, I have seen him. Sorry, Tyler. I'll answer your question here in a second. So going back to Charlie Weiss's super chat. Okay, Peyton's son, I have seen him play. I don't know if he's as athletic as what Tyler Buckner was. Tyler Buckner was a dynamic runner. Absolutely dynamic runner. But I believe what oh gosh. What class is he in? Let me see here. So, okay, Marshall Manning. Okay, so he's a freshman. So he's what, in the 2029 class? So, yeah, he has room to grow for sure. But no, I apologize. I did see him play. Tyler Buckner, I could see it. I don't think he's as mobile as Tyler Buckner. People forget he was a very, very, very dynamic runner in high school. Ceiling as a passer, I think interesting, though. I can see the comparison there. Tyler, sorry, why won't DeBoer run the ball? That is a heck of a question and something that I continue asking myself every single time that I watch him play, watch him coach. I just I don't know if it's not faith in the offensive line. I don't know if there are just some coaches out there that just they have the incessant need to prove to people how smart they are. And we can win by throwing the football 50 times a game. I genuinely I don't understand what the reason is behind it. Because when he was the head coach at Washington, they had a legitimate rushing attack. Obviously, Michael Penix wasn't much of a threat on the ground, but I believe they had a back rush for over 1,000 yards that year. Yeah, yeah. Dylan Johnson rushed for 1,195 yards and 16 touchdowns. Now, that could have also been a byproduct of a passing attack that featured Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan, and Jack Westover was the tight end. They had Jeremy Bernard was a part of that team. He had 34 catches. So I just think Kalen DeBoer is way too West Coast, and we talk all the time about fit. And I just don't think that Kalen DeBoer's fit stylistically is good for Alabama. There's in the two premier leagues in college football, in the Big Ten and in the SEC, I fully believe you have to be able to run the football. Georgia has won the league back-to-back seasons in 24 and 25 by good defense, good ground attack. They're not an air it out team, So Tyler, that's the $1 million question. If Kalen DeBoer strive to be more balanced, I would feel a lot better about having them in my top 5. But Brian mentioned it in the show. There's a world where Alabama falls out of even the top 7 if they don't make the necessary adjustments. So hopefully he does this year, especially with a young quarterback in Keelan Russell. You can't ask that kid to go out and throw the football 35 times a game and hope to find success. I just don't believe that you can do that with them. All right, back up to the top here. We got one from Irish Dragon. Are there top teams that Notre Dame has had issues with in recent history that have lost their luster should Notre Dame beat them? Alabama comes to mind. Winning now doesn't ring the same as during Saban's era. Okay. I get what you're asking. Yeah, Alabama is definitely one of those teams. There's always going to be that slight. If Notre Dame ever beats Alabama, because, look, those are kind of one of the dragons that Notre Dame has yet to slay. And I think of the 2020 game, the Rose Bowl that was played indoors because of COVID. And I think of the 2012 national title game. Yeah, I think it'd be that same luster. Or I think that it loses some of its luster because that's not like the vintage Nick Saban Alabama team. That was some of my pushback from when Michigan beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl. It's we beat a Nick Saban-led Alabama team. It's yeah, but we'd be lying to ourselves if we said the 2023 Alabama Crimson Tide was like the 2015 Alabama Crimson Tide. So Alabama comes to mind there. Outside of that, they've beat Georgia when Kirby Smart was the head coach. Very few matchups with Oregon. I don't think Notre Dame has played Oregon since my time of being a college football fan. Then the others we've kind of already seen them beat, like Florida State. We've watched them beat Florida State recently, but they're not the program that they were back in the day. So, yeah, Alabama would probably be my lead candidate for that one. From Salty, will Ohio State survive their schedule as their defense must replace 7 NFL draft picks and their grueling schedule includes road games at Texas, Indiana, USC, and Iowa? I mean, per my projection, I'm predicting them to. I have Ohio State going 9-0 in conference, 11-1 overall. Their replacements are rough, but kind of like what we talked about on this show before, we have to be able to have an honest conversation with Ohio State, not around what they lost, but just who the team is now. Archer said it before in the chat. There's no replacing Caleb Downs, but can you replace his production with multiple people? Yeah. Some of it, too, is I made the mistake of overlooking Matt Patricia last year. I thought that was a bad hire. And then Ohio State went out and had one of the top 3 defenses in all of college football last year. Can they survive their schedule? Absolutely. If there's one team in the Big Ten that I would have confidence in playing a schedule that consisted of Texas on the road, Iowa on the road, Indiana on the road, USC on the road, Oregon at home, and Michigan at home, it would be Ohio State because they have the one coaching staff that I think has had experience. They have the one head coach that has that experience of having success in those big games. Dan Lanning hasn't had that at Oregon. Curt Cignetti, to a degree, but the highest volume of good teams that he's played in a shorter amount of time was last year in the playoffs, and it was an Alabama team that shouldn't have been in, Oregon who chokes in big games. Then Miami was a good win. It was a really good win. I'm not trying to downplay what Indiana did last year, but Ohio State's regular season schedule this year is an absolute gauntlet. But can they survive it? I absolutely think that they can. Another one from Salty. Can Matt Campbell push Penn State over the edge? Campbell inherits a highly favorable schedule, but he has used the transfer portal effectively. But has he used the transfer portal effectively to get Penn State back into the CFP mix? Look, I think Matt Campbell is a good coach, but the conversation around Penn State has gone to two different sides of the coin. On one side, it's people who are willing to die on the hill that Matt Campbell should be one of the greatest coaches ever. So obviously, I'm embellishing a little bit. And then there's some people who think that they're going to absolutely stink. I don't think they're going to absolutely stink. I just don't think they brought back enough good players. I mean, look, would we have ranked Iowa State that high? If Rocco Becht was still the quarterback, and they have Carson Hansen at running back, and you're bringing over Trevor Burr, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. I could be wrong there, but he comes over from Iowa State. You're bringing over Jeremiah Cooper. You got him out of the transfer portal from Iowa State. You're bringing a lot of pieces with you. They have all those pieces, and Matt Campbell's still at Iowa State. Are we ranking Iowa State as the 18th best team in college football? I don't think so. I don't. So can they push Matt Campbell can Matt Campbell push Penn State over the edge? No, I don't think so. And if he does, I don't think it's happening this year. I think Rocco Becht is a nice quarterback. I don't put him anywhere close to the top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. So no, I don't think he pushes Penn State over the edge, to give you a solidified answer there, Salty. I don't. I think they're going to have a nice season, but I've said this once, I'll say it again. I think there's going to be a lot of people in Happy Valley that get a false sense of hope because of what their schedule is made up of. I mean, look, there's a world. Would it shock anybody in this chat if Penn State at the end of the season, we look back and they end up playing no ranked teams? Your out of conference is Marshall, at Temple, and Buffalo. You're home against Wisconsin, then you're at Northwestern. You're home against USC, at Michigan. The teams in the conversation to be ranked at the end of the year is USC, Michigan, and Washington. Would it shock anybody if USC, Michigan, and Washington ended the season unranked? Would that shock anybody? It wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't be beside myself. And then outside of that, who else is in contention to be ranked on their schedule? Maryland? Minnesota, maybe. I mean, if Minnesota has the season that Brian projects them to have, which I don't think is a crazy take at all, that they could be ranked, but I'm not willing to predict that. Purdue's not going to be ranked. Northwestern's not going to be ranked. I don't think Wisconsin's going to be ranked, and I can guarantee you Marshall, Temple, and Buffalo aren't going to be ranked. So there's a world where that happens. That's going to be my whole thing. So be very curious to see, Salty. I'm with you. But no, I do not think he pushes Penn State over the edge. All righty. Another one from Notre Dame Wine and Cheese. Is there any player that could be at their best in their respective position in conference if they were developed under a Notre Dame coach? Is there any player that could be the best in their respective position? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, look. Are we talking like a current Notre Dame coach? Offensive line, I would take it. I would take every offensive lineman out of contention because I think the best offensive lineman in the business is Bob Bostad at Indiana, and he's already in the Big Ten. I would take probably wide receiver out of that conversation as well. Running back could be one. I mean, Jaywan Sider has experience coaching in the Big Ten, and if my memory serves me correctly, which I'm pretty sure that it does, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen looked a heck of a lot different when Jaywan Sider left Happy Valley than when he went to Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price didn't skip a beat. So, I mean, I think Jaywan Sider could be one of them. I mean, if Mike Mickens was still at Notre Dame, Archer, you can disagree with me if you think incorrectly, but I would have loved to have seen what Mike Mickens could have done with a secondary that has Devin Sanchez and Jermaine Matthews and Jalen McClain. I think that would have been very interesting to see. Devin Sanchez could become that. I'm not saying that he won't become that because Mike Mickens isn't his defensive backs coach, but I think that'd be interesting to see. There's definitely players. I would put Devin Sanchez in that conversation, but there's just some that I need to see more of. I need to see Gino Guidugli do more than just with CJ Carr. For him to say that he could take Julian Saint and make him better than what Julian Saint already is. Or he could take Dante Moore and make him better than what Dante Moore already is. So there's just a lot of coaches on Notre Dame staff that I have to see a little bit more from. Not saying that they can't. I just got to see more of it. All righty. Let's see here. Actually, I believe all the rest of the questions are from Salty. So Salty, here we go. Can the middle of the pack trigger mass chaos? Will teams like Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Washington be either college football playoff dark horses or fragile underachievers? I'm not putting any of those in contention for a CFP dark horse. Iowa's going to be the same that Iowa always is, in my opinion. I think they're always going to be that team that they start off ranked. They're going to start to actually, I think that's how I have their season panning out. Obviously, they begin ranked. They're in the 20s. They beat Northern Illinois. They beat Iowa State. They beat Northern Iowa. And then I have them losing at Michigan, home against Ohio State, and then on the road at Washington, just that cross-country travel. That Iowa's schedule after the bye is absolutely terrible. I mean, it's your Minnesota on the road, Wisconsin at home, at Northwestern, home against Purdue, at Illinois, home against Nebraska. I have Iowa going 9-3. I have them going 6-3 in conference. There's no win post October 17th that they can pick up that would bolster their resume enough to warrant being a college football dark horse. So, no, I would not. But can they trigger mass chaos? Yeah. If Iowa goes and upsets, if I'm wrong about Ohio State, they go and upset Ohio State, yeah. But outside of that, I don't know if there's anybody else on their schedule that's even in contention for the playoffs to be like for them to upset to shake things up. So Iowa would kind of be banking on upsetting Ohio State. Nebraska could be. I'm not banking on it. I'm not impressed with Anthony Calandria. I'm not. We've seen him be a Power 4 quarterback before at Virginia, and with weapons like Malachi Fields, I'm not high on him. Wisconsin, I mean, sure, they could trigger mass chaos. I mean, Wisconsin gets Notre Dame to open up the season. Wisconsin also plays. Wisconsin doesn't play Ohio State, Oregon, or Indiana. So could they cause? Yeah, they could upset USC and put an end to their college football dark horse hopes. Washington is a team that I would keep my eye on when we were going through the teams. I think it was Tommy Gunn's question around who in the power conferences between the Big Ten and the SEC could kind of play like upset alert. Washington's one of those. Yeah, they get Indiana and Oregon, so they could cause some chaos for sure. That's how I would be. That's how I'd answer that one, Salty. All righty, let's see here. Another one from Salty. How will the SEC's move from an 8 to 9 game conference schedule impact the CFP? Will the CFP committee finally admit a 3-loss SEC team over a 2-loss team from an easier conference? I don't know if there's easier. Well, to a degree, there's easier conferences, but I think there's just easier individual schedules. This goes back to what we were talking about at the very, very beginning of this show, Salty. It's hard to get a gauge on how good teams are because you have 18 teams in the Big Ten. You have 17 teams in the ACC and then 16 in both of the Big 12 and the SEC. Not all conference schedules are built the same. So will a 3-loss SEC team get in over a 2-loss Ohio State team? No. Will a 3-loss SEC team get in over a 2-loss Penn State team? You bet. At least they should. So that's what makes it so hard to gauge. You know, how will their 8 to 9 get? I mean, it depends on, again, what the conference schedule makeup is. I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, man, but not all schedules are created equally. I mean, even in something like the SEC. You know, I look at the tail end of Texas A&M's schedule. You get out on the road against Alabama and then a bye, and then you're at South Carolina, you're home against Tennessee, you're at Oklahoma, and then you're home against Texas. That's a rough schedule. That's a really, really rough schedule. And then I look at the tail end of Missouri schedule. You're at Arkansas, home against Texas, which would be tough, on the road against Georgia, which would be tough. Then you get Kentucky. Yeah, so I think that's what's difficult. It just depends on more so the individual team than the overall conference. But I got to imagine that even the committee, with how they are and how they view the SEC, they'd put in a 3-loss SEC team over, let's just say hypothetically, a 2-loss BYU team where they only lost really to one team just twice. I could see that happening because we've seen it happen already. All righty, last one from Salty, and then we'll get out of here. Let's see. Is Texas built to win its first SEC title? With Arch Manning returning in a significantly upgraded offensive line, will they challenge back-to-back SEC champions Georgia? Yeah. Yeah. Are they built to win it? Yes. Again, I go back to, do they have the correct driver of the ship? If Steve Sarkisian can get out of his own way, have a little bit more intestinal fortitude, and not whine, cry, and moan so much about, we have to play this out of conference team and we got to do this. And yeah, I absolutely think they can. They have the talent too. I think they have the most talented roster in the SEC. I think they have one of the most talented rosters in college football. But Sark is going to have to get out of his own way to do it. But they are one of the few rosters in college football in the SEC that can knock off Georgia. That's more talented than Georgia. So yeah, I absolutely think that they are built to win it. Now it's just, can they go out and do it? I think that'll be huge. Folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Brian and I are going to be back tomorrow at noon. We're going over some predictions and we're giving season superlatives. It's going to be a really, really fun show. You're not going to want to miss that one. Guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Beat. They're also going to be talking about like breakouts for this season, the show you're not going to want to miss. On your way out of this show, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast. Friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Also, there should be some, if I had to guess, some sort of practice report coming out. Brian is actually on his way to practice right now. It's why I finished the show solo. So until next time, I'm Trevor. Brian will also see you tomorrow back here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.